It's quiet. The night is here, and you're in the right place. This video brings you long ghost stories and haunted encounters designed to relax your mind and soothe you into sleep. If you enjoy the stories, like, subscribe, and share where you're listening from. Make yourself comfortable, and let's begin. Story 1. Every tenant before me broke the lease because of the same shadow. The lease smelled of mildew and cheap ink when Mr. Finch slid it across his cluttered desk. "Apartment 3B, he said, not meeting my eyes, his pen hovering over the signature line. His knuckles were white. Rent's $499, utilities included, 6-month minimum. He cleared his throat, a dry rattling sound. Just one condition. He tapped a clause buried near the bottom. Tenant acknowledges awareness of prior occupancy irregularities and waives all claims related to visual or auditory anomalies within the unit, particularly after 8:03 p.m. I squinted. What does that even mean? Finch finally looked up. His eyes were the color of weak tea, ringed with dark circles. "The last 5 tenants," he said quietly, "all broke their leases within a month. Some left in the middle of the night. One, well, she didn't leave. The police found her sitting in the bathtub with the taps running, staring at the ceiling, catatonic. They said she kept whispering about the man who stands where the light won't reach." He pushed a thick manila folder toward me. Inside were photos. A hastily abandoned suitcase spilling clothes into the hallway, a dining table set for 2, plates covered in dust, a child's teddy bear left on a windowsill, and police reports, all listing unspecified psychological distress as the reason for early termination. "The building's old," Finch muttered, wiping his palms on his trousers. "Old buildings hold on to things. Shadows get sticky." He wouldn't say more. I signed anyway. After the foreclosure, after sleeping in my car for 3 weeks, $400 for a 1-bedroom with working heat felt like salvation, even if the salvation came with shadows. Crestview Arms was a hulking brick relic from the 1920s, sandwiched between a laundromat and a boarded-up pawn shop on the wrong side of downtown. My unit was on the 3rd floor, a narrow layout with high ceilings, a single grimy window overlooking a fire escape, and a persistent smell of boiled cabbage that clung to the wallpaper. The first night, I chalked the silence up to exhaustion. The building groaned like all old structures do. Pipes clanked. Floorboards sighed. I fell asleep to the distant wail of sirens. I woke at 2:17 a.m., certain I wasn't alone. The streetlight outside cast a pale, jaundiced glow through the window, painting stripes across the room. In the far corner, where the light from the window didn't quite reach, the darkness was thicker, solid, shaped. A man's silhouette, tall and lean, stood motionless beside the closet door. Not a trick of the light, not a coat on a hook. It had depth, weight. It didn't breathe. It didn't move. It just watched. My blood turned to ice. I lay frozen, counting my pulse in my throat until dawn bleached the room gray. The corner was empty, just peeling floral wallpaper and dust motes dancing in the weak light. Stress, I told myself, sleep deprivation, the streetlight playing tricks. The next night, I left the overhead light on. I drank 3 cups of coffee, forcing myself to stay awake on the lumpy couch. 8:03 p.m. came and went. Nothing. Relief washed over me until I blinked. He was there, not in the corner this time, standing just inside my bedroom doorway, backlit by the hall light I'd left burning. The shadow had no face, No features, just an absence of light shaped like a man in a long coat, hands hanging loosely at his sides. He hadn't been there a second ago. I hadn't heard the door open. My breath hitched. I fumbled for the lamp beside me. When the light flared, the doorway was empty. Only my own trembling shadow stretched long and thin across the floorboards. It became a ritual. Every night around 8:03 p.m., the lights would flicker once, always once. Then he'd appear, sometimes in the kitchen, leaning against the stove, sometimes sitting in the armchair I'd salvaged from the curb, his shadow head tilted as if listening. He never moved, never made a sound, but the air around him grew cold and still, smelling faintly of damp stone and old pennies. I'd turn on every lamp, blast the radio, scream curses at the empty space. The lights would stabilize, the cold would retreat, he'd vanish. But the smell lingered, and the feeling of being watched never left. I asked Finch about it. He was sweeping the lobby's cracked tile floor, back turned. "They all see him," he said flatly, not stopping his rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape. Mrs. Gable in Zone 9, she was a seamstress, said he'd stand over her sewing machine at night, his shadow hand resting on the pedal. She'd wake to find all her thread spools unraveled, tangled like spider webs. He paused, leaning on his broom. Then there was Ben Carter, musician. Swore the shadow would sit on his piano bench after midnight, fingers hovering over the keys. Ben would hear Chopin drifting from his apartment at 3 a.m., but when he'd burst in, the piano was silent, cold. Ben left his saxophone on the fire escape, never came back for it. Finch's voice dropped. The worst was Sarah Miller, last year. She had a little girl, Emily, 3 years old. He swallowed hard. Emily started drawing pictures, always the same thing, a tall black man with no eyes standing in a yellow room. Sarah said Emily called him Mr. No Light. One Tuesday, Sarah found Emily's favorite stuffed rabbit in the bathtub, soaking wet. Emily was sitting on the bathroom floor, shivering, pointing at the corner. She kept saying, "He put Mr. Bunny in the water, Mama. He doesn't like warm things." Finch's hand trembled on the broom handle. Sarah broke her lease that night, drove to her sister's in another state, changed her number. Emily still won't sleep without a nightlight. He finally looked at me, his eyes haunted. He doesn't hurt you, not physically. He just watches. Until the watching becomes too much. Until you feel like you're dissolving under his gaze, that's when you break. The shadow started moving, not teleporting. Walking. Slow, deliberate steps from the corner to the window, from the kitchen to the door. His footsteps made no sound, but the floorboards dipped beneath his unseen weight. Frost bloomed on the window pane where he stood longest. One rainy Thursday, I came home from my night shift at the diner to find all my spice jars lined up on the counter in perfect alphabetical order, something I'd never done. The shadow stood by the sink, his outline faint but unmistakable in the steam rising from the kettle I'd left on. I started researching. The public library's microfiche archives held a brittle newspaper clipping from November 12, 1937. Local optometrist perishes in Crestview arms fire. Dr. Alistair Vance, 42, died when a blaze started in his third floor, apartment Unit 3B, after he fell asleep reading. His body was never recovered. The fire was deemed unusually intense, consuming organic matter completely while sparing structural beams. The article mentioned his reclusive nature. He rarely saw patients after dusk, claiming the light hurts the eyes too much in the dark. His assistant, a woman named Clara, was quoted, "He was a good man, but after his wife died, he stopped letting light into his life, literally. He boarded up his windows." This clipping had a photo. Dr. Vance, sharp-featured, with deep-set eyes that seemed to stare right through the camera lens. And something odd. He stood slightly off-center in the frame, as if avoiding the light. That night, the shadow didn't wait for 8:03 p.m. He stood in the center of my living room at 6:45 p.m., while daylight still bled through the window. He was clearer now, less like an absence, more like a stain on reality. I could see the suggestion of a collar, the line of a coat buttoned to the throat. His head was tilted down as if studying the floorboards. Then, slowly, he raised his shadow face toward me. No eyes, just smooth, featureless darkness where they should be. I screamed, not out of fear, but rage, pure, exhausted fury. "What do you want?" I shouted back and toward the door. "Why won't you leave me alone?" The lights didn't flicker. The shadow didn't vanish. He just stood there, and from the empty space where his mouth should be, a sound emerged, not a voice, but a vibration in the chair itself, like a tuning fork struck deep underground. "See, you see me?" The words weren't in my ears. They were in my bones, in a hollow behind my ribs. Others looked away, pretended I was not. But you see, the shadow took a single step forward. The temperature plummeted. My breath fogged thickly. The vibration came again, softer now, almost pleading. "So tired of the dark. Show me the light." He wasn't threatening me. He was begging. I didn't run. I walked to the window, unlatched it, threw it open wide. Cold November air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and distant traffic. I dragged my armchair, the one he favored, beneath the window. Then I stood beside it, my back to the streetlight's glow. "Here," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "I see you. Now see this." For a long moment, nothing happened. The shadow remained frozen in the center of the room. Then, slowly, he turned, not toward the window, toward me. His featureless face lifted. The vibration trembled in the air. "Too bright. Hurts." "It's supposed to hurt," I said softly. "That's how you know it's real." He took another step, then another. Each movement was stiff, reluctant, as if pushing through deep water. He stopped inches from the armchair. The streetlight fell across him, not banishing him, but changing him. His edges blurred. Wisps of darkness curled away like smoke. For the first time, I saw details. The threadbare wool of his coat sleeve, the dust on his shadow shoes, the deep hollows where his eyes should be, not empty, but filled with a slow, swirling darkness like ink in water. He reached out a hand, not toward me, but toward the light spilling through the window. His shadow fingers passed through the beam. They didn't burn. They shimmered, dissolving at the edges into something almost silver. "Warm," the vibration sighed. "So long. Cold." He sat in the armchair, not heavily, like a man, but like mist settling. The frost on the window began to melt. The smell of damp stone faded, replaced by the crisp, clean scent of rain. He tilted his shadow face up, directly into the streetlight's glow. And he did something I'd never imagined. He relaxed. His shoulders lost their rigid set. His head leaned back against the chair. The swirling darkness in his eye sockets slowed, calming like still water. "Thank you," he breathed, the words barely a whisper in the air. Clara, she tried, but she was afraid. They all were, afraid of the dark man in the corner. He paused. The light seemed to thicken around him, almost golden. I was not always shadow. I was Alistair. I loved light once, loved my wife, loved the way sunlit dust danced in my office. Then the fire, it took my body, took the light, left only this hunger to be seen, not as a monster, as a man. He looked at me, those dark pits holding a depth of sorrow that made my throat tighten. They lock their doors, draw their curtains, pretend I am not. But you opened a window. You sat with me in the light. He began to fade, not vanishing. Unmaken. His edges grew translucent, blending with the moonlight, now joining the street lamp's glow. The chair creaked softly beneath him, a real human sound. The watching is done, he whispered. Tell Finch, the lease holds. Tell him Alistair is warm now. He was gone, truly gone. Not a stain on the wall, not a chill in the air, just an empty armchair bathed in light and the gentle rain whispering against the window. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the armchair, watching the dawn paint the sky peach and gold. The apartment felt different, lighter. The smell of boiled cabbage was gone, replaced by the clean scent of rain-washed brick. At 7 a.m., I walked downstairs. Finch was already in the lobby, sweeping the same patch of floor. He didn't look up as I approached. Another night, huh? He muttered. I heard you shouting, knew you'd break by. I didn't break, I said. He stopped sweeping, slowly raised his head. His eyes widened. Your shadow, he stammered. It's normal. I glanced at the tile floor. My shadow stretched long and ordinary behind me in the lobby's fluorescent light. No extra darkness clung to my heels. No shape lingered in the corners of the room. He's gone, Finch, I said quietly. Alistair Vance. He's not in 3B anymore. Finch dropped his broom. It clattered on the tiles. He sank onto the front desk stool, his face ashen. You saw him? Properly? He sat in my chair, in the light. I pulled the lease from my pocket, the pages crisp. He told me to tell you the lease holds, that he's warm now. Finch covered his face with shaking hands. His shoulders heaved, not with sobs, but with a deep, shuddering release. When he looked up, tears tracked through the dust on his cheeks. I was a superhero when he died, he whispered. I was just a kid. My dad was the manager. We didn't go in after the fire. The heat was too intense. We assumed he was gone, but for weeks after, tenants reported things. Shadows moving, cold spots. A man in a long coat standing in corners. Dad thought it was grief. Playing tricks. Then Mrs. Gable saw him. Then Ben Carter. Dad got scared. He sealed off the unit, changed the locks, pretended 3B didn't exist. Finch's voice broke. But the shadows kept coming. In other apartments, on other floors. My dad, he couldn't take it. Moved away. Left me the building. Left me with him. He wiped his eyes roughly. I thought if I kept renting it out, kept people moving through, the shadow would get bored, would move on. But it never did. It always came back to 3B, waiting. I placed a hand on the scarred wood of the front desk. He wasn't waiting for you to leave. He was waiting for someone to see him. Finch nodded slowly, a fragile hope dawning in his tired eyes. What did he look like? In the light? Tired, I said. Sad. Human. 2 days later, I repainted the walls of 3B, sunshine yellow. I bought new curtains sheer enough to let the light flood in. I left the window open whenever the weather allowed. The apartment never felt cold again. The only shadow that lingered was mine, stretching long and ordinary across the floorboards in the late afternoon sun. Finch hasn't raised my rent. He even fixed the leak of faucet in the kitchen. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I sit in the armchair by the window, reading. And in the corner of my eye, just for a second, I think I see a shimmer in the air, a warmth on the edge of perception, not a shadow, a presence, settled. Last week, a young woman with tired eyes and a suitcase signed a lease for apartment 2A. As Finch handed her the keys, he paused. "One thing," he said gently. "If you ever see a shadow where the light won't reach, don't look away. Open a window, turn on a lamp, sit with it a while." He smiled, a real smile this time. Some shadows just need to remember what it feels like to be warm. The new tenant nodded, bemused. I watched from the third-floor window as she carried her boxes inside, and for the first time in years, the lobby of Crestview Arms didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like a threshold, a place where light finally had learned how to stay. I still keep the street light outside my window unblocked. I still sit in the armchair after dusk, a book in my lap, the room bathed in golden light. Sometimes, when the rain patters against the glass, I swear I hear the faintest sigh, a sound like dust motes dancing in a sunbeam, not a vibration, a breath, resting. I close my book, smile into the warm, ordinary dark. "Good night, Alistair," I whisper. The shadows on the wall don't move. They just hold the light. That's where this tale ends. Now, another waits just beyond the shadows. I accepted a job monitoring deep earth frequencies in a remote station, but the sounds from below are starting to call my name. I am writing this from a diner off Interstate 80. My hands are shaking so bad I can barely hold the pen, and I keep spilling the coffee on the table. The waitress looks at me like I'm a junkie, but I don't care. I haven't slept in 4 days. Every time I close my eyes, I hear the static. I hear the scratching. I hear the voice that sounds like mine, but deeper, wetter, like it's coming through a throat filled with mud. I need to get this down on paper. I need to leave a record, because I think I'm going to die tonight. Or worse, I'm going to go back there. It started because I was desperate. That's how all these stories start, isn't it? Nobody takes a job in the middle of nowhere for minimum wage unless they have no other choice. I had lost my job at the factory. My girlfriend had kicked me out, and I was living in my 2004 Toyota Corolla. I was scrolling through job boards on my phone, using the free Wi-Fi at a library, when I saw it. Position, seismic monitor. Location, Outpost 4, Blackwood Ridge. Duties, monitor automated systems, log frequency data, maintain equipment. Pay, $2,000 a week. Cash, $2,000 a week. For sitting in a room and watching the computer screen. It sounded too good to be true. I called the number. A man answered on the first ring. His voice was dry, cracking like stepping on autumn leaves. "Can you handle silence?" he asked. "No hello? No company name?" "Yes," I said. "Can you stay awake for 12 hours at a time?" "Yes." "Do you have family who will miss you if you are out of cell service for a month?" "No." "Be at the trailhead of Blackwood Ridge at 5 a.m. tomorrow. Don't bring a phone, don't bring a computer. Analog only. We provide the rest." I should have said no. I should have hung up. But I looked at my bank account balance, 12.45, and I said yes. I met the man the next morning. He was driving a black Jeep with no license plates. He was old, maybe 70, with skin that looked like leather and eyes that didn't blink enough. He handed me a duffel bag and a set of keys. "The hike is 4 miles up," he said, pointing to a narrow dirt path disappearing into the dense pine forest. "The station is at the top. It's a concrete bunker. You can't miss it. There is a manual on the desk. Follow the instructions exactly. Do not deviate. I will come back in 30 days with your money." "Wait," I said. "What exactly am I monitoring? Earthquakes?" He looked at me, and for a second I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "We are listening to the tectonic plates," he said, "to make sure they don't shift. Just listen to the needles, kid. If they go into the red, you press the button. That's it." He drove away before I could ask what the button did. I hiked up. The woods were quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no crickets, just the sound of my boots on the dry earth and the wind hissing through the pine needles. The station was ugly. It was a gray concrete block half buried in the side of the mountain. It looked like a World War II bunker. There was a heavy steel door with a wheel lock like a submarine. I unlocked it and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. It smelled of ozone, old copper, and stale coffee. The room was one large space. In the center, there was a massive console of equipment that looked like it was from the 1970s. Oscilloscopes with glowing green lines, reel-to-reel tape decks, and a wall of speakers. In the corner, there was a cot and a small kitchenette with a stack of canned beans and a manual can opener. But the most disturbing thing was the hole. In the back of the room, behind a thick pane of plexiglass, there was a hole in the floor. It was a borehole, maybe 3 feet wide, going straight down into the earth. There were cables running down into it, thick black cables that pulsed slightly as if liquid was being pumped through them. I settled in. The first 3 days were boring. I read the manual. It was simple. Protocol: wear the headphones at all times during your shift, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Record the frequency levels every hour. If the frequency drops below 10 hertz, turn up the gain. If the frequency rises above 150 hertz, initiate the dampening sequence. Never speak into the microphone unless instructed. I sat at the desk. I put on the heavy padded headphones. The sound of the earth is boring. It's just a low hum. Like a refrigerator running in the next room. Occasionally, there would be a pop or a crackle, which the manual said was rock settling deep underground. I wrote down the numbers: 40 hertz, 42 hertz, 39 hertz. It was easy money. On the 4th night, the rhythm changed. It was 2 a.m. The wind was howling outside, shaking the heavy steel door. I was eating cold beans from the can. I looked at the oscilloscope. The green line wasn't a flat wave anymore. It was spiking. Thump, thump, thump. It looked like a heartbeat. I adjusted the volume on the headphones. Thump, thump. It was slow, massive. It sounded like a hammer hitting a mattress wrapped in 10 layers of blankets. It was deep, so deep I felt it in my chest more than I heard it in my ears. I checked the frequency. 12 hertz. It was getting low. I followed the rules. I reached for the knob labeled gain and turned it up. The sound got louder. Thump, thump. And then, in the space between the thumps, I heard something else. Scritch, scratch. It sounded like fingernails on chalkboard or claws on stone. It was coming from the microphone deep in the hole. I leaned closer to the monitor. Just rocks, I whispered to myself. Just rocks sliding against rocks? Then a voice spoke in my ear. Hungry. I ripped the headphones off and threw them on the desk. I spun around, grabbing the flashlight. "Who's there?" I shouted. The concrete room echoed. "Who is it?" Silence. Just the hum of the machines. I checked the door. It was locked from the inside. I checked the plexiglass shield around the hole. It was intact. I told myself I was hallucinating. Isolation psychosis. It happens. I put the headphones back on, leaving one ear uncovered. The scratching was gone. The heartbeat was gone. The line was flat again. I didn't sleep that day. I lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind. On the seventh night, the equipment started moving on its own. I was sitting at the desk, fighting to keep my eyes open. I had drunk 3 cups of terrible instant coffee. Suddenly, the reel-to-reel tape deck spun to life. Whoa! The tape started spinning fast. The needles on the VU meters slammed into the red. I hadn't touched anything. I grabbed the manual. There was nothing about this. I put the headphones on. The sound was screaming, not a human scream. It was electronic screaming, feedback, static, white noise. But underneath it, there was a pattern. Short, long, short, short, long, short, Morse code. No, it was too rhythmic. It was breathing, inhale, static, exhale, scream. I reached to turn the volume down, but the knob wouldn't turn. It was stuck. Then the red phone on the wall rang. I jumped so hard I knocked my chair over. There was a red rotary phone mounted near the door. The manual didn't mention it. I didn't even know it was connected to anything. Ring, ring, ring. It was a loud mechanical bell. I walked over to it slowly. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I picked up the receiver. "Hello?" "Don't listen to it," a voice said. It was the old man who hired me, but he sounded different, terrified. "Arthur, tell me you aren't listening to it." "The tape deck started on its own," I yelled. "What is happening? What is down there?" "It's waking up," the old man whispered. "We miscalculated. The dampeners aren't holding. Arthur, listen to me carefully. There is a breaker switch in the kitchenette, behind the fridge. You need to kill the power to the audio system. Do it now." "Why?" "Because it learns," he screamed. "It learns frequencies. If you let it listen to the room, it will learn your voice. And once it has your voice, it can open the door." The line went dead. I dropped the phone. "It will learn your voice." I looked at a console. The tape reels were still spinning. The needles were bouncing. And then, coming through the speakers on the wall, not the headphones, the main speakers, I heard a sound. "Hello?" It was my voice. It was the recording of me answering the phone 10 seconds ago. "Hello? What is happening? What is down there?" The machine was playing my voice back to me. But then it changed. The pitch shifted down. It became deeper, gravelly. "What is down there, Arthur?" It said my name. I hadn't said my name. I scrambled to the kitchenette. I shoved the heavy refrigerator aside. There was a gray metal panel on the wall. I ripped it open. There was a single large switch labeled Audio Mains. I grabbed it and yanked it down. Clunk! The lights in the station flickered. The tape deck slowed down. Woo! Click! The speakers went silent. The room was dead quiet. I stood there, panting, sweating. I was safe. I had killed the power. Then, from the hole in the back of the room behind the plexiglass, I heard a sound. Knock, knock, knock. 3 distinct knocks on the glass from the inside. I shined my flashlight at the hole. The borehole was dark, but on the inside of the plexiglass there was condensation, and in the condensation something had drawn a shape, a smiley face. I backed away. No, that's impossible. It's a sealed shaft. Knock, knock, knock. Louder this time. The glass vibrated. I grabbed my jacket. I grabbed the keys. I was leaving. To hell with the money. To hell with the old man. I ran to the steel door. I grabbed the wheel lock and turned it. It wouldn't move. I spun it the other way. Stuck. I threw my weight against it. It felt like it was welded shut. Then I saw the keypad. I hadn't noticed it before. A digital keypad next to the door. The screen was lit up red. Lockdown initiated. Containment breach. Open, I screamed, banging on the steel. Let me out. From the speakers, which should have been dead, a voice crackled. Let me out. It was mocking me. I looked at the console. The power switch I had pulled. It was physically pushed back up into the on position. I hadn't touched it. The tape reel started spinning again. I ran to the corner of the room, grabbing the heavy metal can opener as a weapon. I huddled on the cot. What do you want? I whispered. The speakers crackled. Arthur, hungry. I spent the next 3 days in that corner. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just watched the hole. Every hour the sounds got worse. First it was scratching. Then it was screaming. Then it was singing. It sang nursery rhymes. Mary had a little lamb. But the voice was distorted, like a choir of drowning children. Then, on the 10th night, the visual feed turned on. There was a small green monitor on the console labeled Bore Cam. I had never looked at it because the manual said the camera was broken. It flickered to life. The image was grainy, black and white. It showed the rock walls of the shaft, deep underground. The camera was moving. It was being pulled up. I watched, paralyzed. The camera passed layers of rock, granite, shale. Then it passed something else, flesh. The walls of the shaft were pulsing. They were lined with a thick gray material that looked like skin. Veins throbbed in the rock. The camera kept coming up. 500 feet, 400 feet. It passed a nest. Carved into the side of the rock wall was a cavity, and inside the cavity were things that looked like eggs. Translucent, gelatinous sacs the size of beach balls. Inside them, dark shapes writhed. The camera kept coming. 200 feet, 100 feet. I could hear the physical sound now, not through the speakers, through the air, slithering, wet, heavy, sliding sounds coming from the shaft. I looked at the plexiglass. It was fogging up. Heat was radiating from the hole. The camera feed reached the top. On the screen, I saw the underside of the plexiglass cover, and then I saw a face. It pressed against the camera lens. It didn't have eyes. It had holes. Dozens of small, perfectly round holes where a face should be. And they were all opening and closing, whistling. It was made of holes. And then the plexiglass cracked. Crack. A spiderweb fracture appeared in the center of the shield. I knew I had seconds. I looked around the room. The door was sealed. The phone was dead. The ventilation ducked. Above the kitchenette there was a square vent. It was small, maybe 18 inches wide, but I was skinny. I dragged the table over. I climbed up. I used the can opener to unscrew the bolts. My fingers were bleeding. Crash! The plexiglass shattered. The sound of the explosion deafened me. A smell filled the room. Sulfur, rot, and old blood. I pulled the vent cover off. I squeezed my head and shoulders in. Behind me, I heard the thing pull itself out of the hole. Squelch, thud. It sounded heavy, wet, "Arthur," it hissed. It wasn't coming from the speakers. It was in the room. "Where are you going?" I kicked my leg, shoving myself deeper into the duct. It was tight. The metal pressed against my chest. I couldn't breathe. I crawled. I crawled through the dark, dusty metal tube. I heard the creature tearing the room apart. I heard the metal console being ripped from the floor. I heard the cot being smashed. Then I heard it sniffing. Sniff, sniff. It was sniffing the air, tracking me. I heard a heavy thud against the wall below the vent. It knew where I was. I crawled faster. The duct went up at an angle. I pushed with my toes, scraping my skin raw. Screech! Metal tearing. It was peeling the vent open from the wall. I scrambled up, turning a corner in the ductwork. I saw moonlight ahead, a grate leading to the outside. I kicked the grate. It flew off. I fell out onto the dirt, rolling down the hill. The cool night air hit my face. I stood up and ran. I ran down the mountain trail in the dark. I fell over roots, smashed my face on branches, twisted my ankle. I didn't stop. Behind me, from the concrete bunker, I heard a sound that will haunt me forever. It wasn't a roar. It was a broadcast. The creature was projecting a sound so loud it shook the trees. It was the sound of a baby crying. Then the sound of a woman screaming for help. Then the sound of my own voice amplified 1,000 times. "Help me! Please, God, help me!" It was baiting me, trying to get me to turn around. I reached my car. I fumbled with the keys. I got inside and locked the doors. The engine sputtered, then started. I drove down that mountain road at 80 miles an hour. I almost went off the cliff 3 times. I drove until I hit the highway. I drove until the sun came up. I'm at the diner now. I tried to call the number of the man who hired me. The line is dead. I looked up the location on Google Maps. There is no Outpost 4. There is no Blackwood Ridge. The area is marked as a geological exclusion zone, danger, unstable soil. But here is the part that makes me shake. Here is why I am writing this. My hearing hasn't come back to normal. Everything sounds muffled. But 5 minutes ago, the jukebox in the diner started playing a song. It was an old country song. But halfway through, the lyrics changed. The singer's voice warped. It dropped in pitch. "Arthur," the jukebox sang, "I can taste you." The waitress didn't notice. The trucker in the corner didn't notice. Only I heard it. And now my phone is vibrating. I don't have the old man's number saved. It's coming up as unknown, but I know who it is. It's not the old man. I can hear the breathing through the phone before I even answer it. It's the frequency. It traveled with me. It's in the network now. I'm going to go to the bathroom and smash my phone. Then I'm going to steal a car that doesn't have a radio. If you read this, stay away from the mountains. Stay away from the quiet places. And if you hear a humming sound coming from the ground, run. Don't listen to it. Don't try to find where it's coming from. Because once it learns your name, it never stops calling. The waitress is walking over to me. She looks confused. "Sir?" she asks. "Your nose is bleeding." I wipe my face. My hand comes away red. "And, sir," she says, pointing to my coffee cup, "your coffee is vibrating." I look down. Ripples are forming in the black liquid. Thump, thump, thump. It's here. It traveled through the ground. I have to go. God help me. The story ends here. Let's begin the next one. I answered a late-night room rental ad that I still can't forget. I wasn't looking for something permanent. That's important. If I had been trying to settle, I might have been more careful. But I only needed a place for a month, maybe 2. Somewhere cheap, somewhere quiet, somewhere I could sleep. I had just started a night shift job at a warehouse on the edge of the city. The pay was decent, but the hours were brutal, and most landlords didn't like the idea of someone coming and going at odd times. Hotels were too expensive, friends' couches were already worn thin, so I searched online, scrolling through local listings at 3 in the morning, eyes dry, brain half off. That's when I saw the post. No photos, no description really. Room for rent, private, quiet house, close to transit, cheap, call only. It had been reposted several times over the past few weeks. No comments, no replies underneath. That should have bothered me more than it did. I called. The man answered after the second ring. His voice was calm, steady, and oddly awake for the hour. "Yes," he said before I could speak. "The room is still available." We set a time for me to come by later that day. He gave me the address. Before hanging up, he said something that stuck with me. "I don't usually rent to night workers," he said, "but you might be a good fit." I didn't ask what he meant. The house was in an older part of the city, one of those neighborhoods that used to be nice and then got forgotten instead of ruined. Tall trees, narrow streets, homes built close together, each one slightly different, like they were designed by memory instead of plans. The house itself was tall and narrow, with dark siding and a porch that leaned just a little to the left. Nothing was broken, nothing was boarded up. It just felt off, like it was holding its breath. The man opened the door before I knocked. Up close, he looked older than I expected. Late 60s, maybe early 70s. Gray hair combed neatly back, clean clothes, no smell of smoke or alcohol. His eyes were alert, but tired. "You're right on time," he said. Inside the house was very quiet. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. Like sound, didn't like being there. No TV noise, no radio, no hum of appliances. Even the refrigerator didn't make a sound. I became very aware of my own breathing. He showed me the room upstairs, small but clean. A bed, a dresser, a desk, a single window facing the side yard. The lock on the door worked, which made me feel better. The price was lower than anything else I'd seen. "Any rules?" I asked. He hesitated. "Yes," he said. "Please don't leave your room between midnight and 4 a.m. And if you hear anything unusual, ignore it." I smiled, thinking he was trying to scare me. He didn't smile back. I moved in that night. The first few days were normal enough. I worked, came home, slept during the day. The house stayed quiet, too quiet. I never heard the owner move around. I never heard him cook, shower, or watch TV. Sometimes I wondered if he left at all. On the 4th night, I came home early. My shift ended sooner than usual, and I arrived around 11:30 p.m. The house was dark. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. As soon as I closed it behind me, I felt it. That feeling you get when you realize you're not alone. I stood still, listening. From upstairs came a faint sound, slow footsteps, bare feet, moving carefully like whoever it was didn't want to be heard. I assumed it was the owner and started up the stairs. Halfway up, the footsteps stopped. Then they turned around. They came toward the stairs. I froze. A shape appeared at the top step, tall, thin, just a shadow against the darker hallway behind it. "Hello?" I said. The shape didn't move. Then slowly, it stepped back out of sight. I waited a full minute before going up the rest of the way. The hallway was empty. All the doors were closed. I didn't sleep much that night. After that, things started to change. I began hearing sounds during the day, light tapping from inside the walls, soft dragging noises above the ceiling. Once, I heard what sounded like someone quietly crying from the room next to mine, even though I knew for a fact no one lived there. I asked the owner about it. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "The house settles." I asked him if anyone else stayed there before me. "Yes," he said. "Where are they now?" "Not here," he replied. That was the end of the conversation. The first really bad night happened a week later. I woke up at 2:14 a.m. to the sound of someone whispering my name. Not shouting, not calling, whispering right outside my door. I lay completely still, heart pounding, staring at the dark shape of the door. The whisper came again, slower this time, like whoever was saying it was tasting. The sound, my name, then a soft knock, one knock, then another. I held my breath. The handle turned slightly, stopped, then turned back. Footsteps moved away down the hall. In the morning, I found scratches on the outside of my door, long, thin marks, like fingernails dragged down the wood. I didn't tell the owner. Sleep became difficult. When I did sleep, I dreamed of the house, hallways that stretched to toggle, doors that opened into rooms that didn't exist, people standing in corners facing the walls, whispering to themselves. One night, I woke up standing in the hallway. I don't remember getting out of bed. I was barefoot, facing the stairs, my body stiff like it didn't belong to me. From downstairs came a low sound like slow breathing, but deeper than a person's. I went back to my room and locked the door. The next morning, the lock was open. I started counting the footsteps. There were always more than one set, sometimes two, sometimes three. Once, I counted at least 6, moving in different directions, stopping and starting like they were confused or arguing silently. They never went downstairs between midnight and 4. They only stayed on my floor. One night, I heard them go into the empty room at the end of the hall. I heard the door open. I heard something heavy dragged across the floor. Then I heard crying. It sounded close, familiar. It sounded like me. I decided to leave. I packed my bags at noon and planned to go straight to a motel after my shift. I just needed one more night. That night, the house felt different, heavier. The air was warm and smelled faintly metallic, like blood. At exactly midnight, the footsteps started all at once, running, doors opening and closing, whispering turning into low, urgent murmurs. My doorknob shook violently. Something hit the door hard enough to make the frame crack. I screamed for the owner. The noise stopped instantly. The hallway went silent. I opened the door. At the end of the hall, the owner stood at the top of the stairs. "They know you're leaving," he said calmly. I asked him what they were. He sighed, like someone tired of explaining the same thing over and over. "This house attracts people who don't want to be alone," he said. "Sometimes they stay longer than their bodies do." I asked him why he rented rooms here. He looked at me with something close to pity. "Someone has to feed the house," he said. The lights went out. Hands grabbed me from behind, cold hands. Too many fingers. I don't remember how I got out. I woke up in my car, parked 3 blocks away, my bags in the back seat. My phone said it was 4:07 a.m. I never went back. I still hear footsteps at night. Not every night, just when I'm alone. They stop outside my bedroom door and wait. And sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I hear the owner's voice in my head, calm and steady. You were a good fit. And I know the house is still hungry. The night grows deeper as we leave this story behind and move on to the next. I bought a house that came with a set of VHS tapes in the basement, and now I wish I was blind. I am writing this from a hotel room in Nevada. I have blocked the door with the dresser. I have unplugged the television. I have covered the mirrors. I can't be around reflections anymore. Every time I see my own face, I see static behind my eyes. I see the lines of track and distortion running down my skin. If you are a collector of vintage media or just someone who likes to browse estate sales for hidden gems, stop. Do not buy the unlabeled tapes. Do not buy the ones with handwritten dates. And for the love of God, if you find a tape labeled Home Movie, do not watch. Listen to the warning. Burn it, smash it, bury it. Just don't put it in the VCR. My name is Kevin. I was 32, a graphic designer who worked from home. I had just bought my first house, a fixer-upper in a quiet suburb of Ohio. It was cheap, built in the 70s, with shag carpet and wood paneling. The previous owner had died, an old man named Mr. Henderson who had no family. The house was sold as is, which meant it came full of his junk. I spent the first week cleaning out the basement. It was a finished basement, dark and smelling of mildew. In the corner, there was a heavy wooden cabinet. Inside, I found a collection of VHS tapes. There were hundreds of them. Most were labeled with innocuous things like Super Bowl 85, news broadcasts, sitcoms. I figured Henderson was a hoarder who taped everything off TV. But on the bottom shelf, pushed way to the back, was a shoebox taped shut with layers of duct tape. I cut it open. Inside were 6 tapes. They were black, generic cassettes with white labels. The labels were handwritten in shaky, jagged letters. Tape 1, the window. Tape 2, the door tape. 3, the hallway tape. 4, the bedroom tape. 5, the sleeper tape. 6, the waking. I was curious. Who wouldn't be? I assumed they were just creepy home movies or maybe some weird art project. I had an old VCR TV combo unit in the garage that I hadn't thrown out yet. I brought it down to the basement, plugged it in, and popped in tape 1, the window. The screen flickered with static. Blue screen. Then the image cut in. It was grainy, low-quality footage, handheld. It was shot at night. The camera was pointed at a window from the outside. I recognized the window immediately. It was the kitchen window of my house. The camera was steady. It just filmed the window. Inside, I could see Mr. Henderson sitting at the kitchen table eating soup. He looked younger, maybe in his 50s. He was oblivious. The tape ran for an hour. Just footage of a man eating, reading the paper, washing dishes. It was boring, but unsettling. Someone had been stalking him. I ejected it and put in tape 2, the door. This one was shot from inside the house. The camera was set up on a tripod in the living room facing the front door. It was night again. The lights were off. Nothing happened for 20 minutes. Then the mail slot on the door opened. A long, thin metal rod slid through. It wiggled around, feeling for the lock. It failed. The rod retracted. Then a face appeared in the mail slot. Just an eye. A wide, unblinking eye staring into the living room. It looked around, scanning. Then the tape cut to static. I was creeped out. I should have called the police then. But I told myself this was old footage. decades old. The stalker was probably dead or in jail. I put in tape 3, the hallway. This footage was different. It wasn't static. The camera was moving. It was being held by someone walking through the house. The camera moved silently down the hallway. It paused at photos on the wall. It paused at a mirror. In the mirror, I saw the cameraman, or rather, I saw what he was wearing. He was dressed in a full-body black spandex suit, like a morph suit, but thicker. No face, no skin showing, just a black silhouette. He waved at the mirror, a slow, mocking wave. Then he walked to the basement door. He opened it. He walked down the stairs, the same stairs I had just walked down. He walked to the corner of the basement, to the wooden cabinet. He opened the cabinet. He placed a shoebox inside. The tape ended. I froze. My skin crawled. The tapes I was watching, the stalker had put them there, for Henderson to find, or for me. I looked at the cabinet in the corner. It looked ominous now in the dim basement light. I grabbed tape 4, the bedroom. My hands were shaking. I had to know. I put it in. The footage was shot from inside a closet. The shuttered doors were cracked open just an inch. Through the slat, I could see a bed. Mr. Henderson was sleeping in the bed. The camera zoomed in on his face. He was snoring softly. Then the closet door opened. The camera moved out into the room. The figure in the black suit stood over the bed. He just stood there, towering over the sleeping old man. He reached out a gloved hand. He touched Henderson's face, gently, a stroke on the cheek. Henderson stirred, but didn't wake. The figure leaned down. The camera got close to the figure's face, the smooth black fabric where a face should be. And then a sound came from the TV speakers. Breathing. Heavy, wet breathing. But it wasn't coming from the tape. It sounded like it was behind me. I spun around. The basement was empty. "Just the acoustics," I whispered. "Just the echo." I turned back to the TV. The tape had ended. I picked up tape 5, the sleeper. I hesitated. I really didn't want to watch it, but I felt a compulsion, a pull, like gravity. I pushed the tape in. The screen was black. No image, just audio. It was a recording of someone sleeping, the rhythmic in-out of breath. Then a voice whispered over the breathing, "He doesn't know I'm here. He thinks he's alone. He thinks locks keep people out. But locks are just suggestions." The voice was distorted, deep, digital. "I live in the spaces he doesn't look. I live in the crawl space. I live in the attic. I live in the walls." Then the image cut in. It was footage of the attic. My attic! I recognized the insulation and the rafters. In the corner of the attic, there was a sleeping bag, a pile of candy wrappers, a bucket. Someone had been living up there. The camera panned to a hole in the floorboards. Through the hole, light was shining. The camera lowered to the hole. I could see down into the master bedroom, directly onto the bed. The tape cut to static. I ran upstairs. I grabbed a flashlight and a ladder. I went to the hallway ceiling hatch. I pushed it open. I shined a light into the attic. It was empty, dust, insulation. But in the corner, there was a flattened area in the insulation, like someone had been lying there recently, and there were candy wrappers, fresh ones, and a hole, a small hole drilled into the floor. I looked through it. I could see my own bed, my pillows. The realization hit me like a truck. These tapes weren't just old. Some of the footage, the candy wrappers, looked modern. I ran back to the basement. I grabbed the last tape. Tape 6, The Waking. I had to see it. I had to know how it ended. I shoved it into the VCR. The screen flickered. It was a live feed. It wasn't a recording. It was showing the basement. It was showing me. The camera was positioned behind me in the corner of the room near the water heater. I turned around slowly. There was nothing there, just shadows. I looked back at the TV. On the screen, I was turning around, but on the screen, there was someone standing right behind me. The figure in the black suit. He was standing inches from my back. I spun around again, swinging my arms. "Who's there?" Empty air. I looked at the TV. On the screen, the figure was still there. He was mocking me, miming my movements. When I swung my arm, he ducked. When I yelled, he put a finger to where his lips should be. He pointed at the TV. I looked closer at the screen. The figure on the screen reached out. He reached toward the camera lens that was filming us. He grabbed the edges of the TV frame. And then the impossible happened. Hands, black, gloved hands, pushed out of the television screen. They were three-dimensional. They stretched the glass like it was liquid. They grasped the sides of the TV set. A head pushed through the glass. The smooth, black, faceless head. It was climbing out of the TV. I screamed and grabbed a heavy wooden cabinet. I shoved it over. It crashed into the TV stand. The TV shattered. Sparks flew. Smoke filled the room. The hands retracted. The figure vanished into the static of the broken tube. I ran. I grabbed my car keys and ran out of the house. I didn't lock the door. I didn't turn off the lights. I drove until I hit the state line. I stopped at this hotel. I thought I was safe. But an hour ago, I turned on the hotel TV to watch the news. The channel was fuzzy, static. Then the image cut in. It was footage of me, sleeping in the hotel bed. It must have been filmed 10 minutes ago when I dozed off. The camera angle was from the ceiling, and standing in the corner of the hotel room, barely visible in the shadows, was the figure in black. He waved. Then text appeared on the screen, white and jagged. Tape 7, the hotel. I unplugged the TV. I smashed it, but now I hear it. From the bathroom, click, whir, the sound of a VCR rewinding, but there is no VCR in the bathroom. I'm looking at the bathroom mirror from where I'm sitting. My reflection is in the mirror. I look terrified, but behind my reflection, the shower curtain is moving. A black hand is pulling it back and holding a camcorder, recording. I have to go. I have to find a place with no screens, no mirrors, no lenses. If you find a box of tapes, don't be curious. Curiosity is the lens they use to find you. And once they find you, you become the show. End of tape. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. I downloaded an app to record my sleep talking. It recorded a conversation between me and someone under my bed. I am a rational man. I work in logistics. I deal with spreadsheets, shipping containers, and hard data. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in demons. And I certainly didn't believe that my one-bedroom apartment on the 5th floor of a secure complex was anything other than a box of drywall and IKEA furniture. I started using the app, SleepSpeak, about 3 weeks ago. My girlfriend, Emily, had stayed over a few times and complained that I was mumbling in my sleep. She said it was creepy, that I sounded like I was arguing with someone. She broke up with me for unrelated reasons, or so she said, but the comment stuck. I wanted to know what I was saying. Was it stress? Suppressed anger? Apnea? The app is simple. It runs in the background. It uses a noise gate to ignore silence and the hum of the air conditioner only recording when it detects distinct vocal frequencies. In the morning, it gives you a list of events with timestamps. Night 1 to 3 were uneventful. A few recordings of me snoring. One recording of me groaning and shifting the duvet. I felt silly for even using it. Night 4 was when it started. I woke up on Tuesday morning feeling drained, like I'd run a marathon in my sleep. I grabbed my phone and saw the notification. 4 new events detected. I clicked the first one. 2:03 a.m. Me, muffled. No, the red one. Just nonsense, dream gibberish. I clicked the second one. 3:15 a.m. Me. Put it back. Still normal. I clicked the third one. 3:45 a.m. The waveform on the screen was different. Usually my voice showed up as a jagged blue block of sound. This recording had that, but intertwined with it was a second, much thinner, sharper red spike. I pressed play. Me, groggy. It's too tight. Silence for 3 seconds. Voice B, it has to be tight, or it won't fit. I dropped the phone on my duvet. My heart did a somersault in my chest. I sat there in the morning light, staring at the screen. The voice, it wasn't Emily. It wasn't a neighbor shouting through the wall. It was a whisper, a dry, rasping whisper. And the audio fidelity was terrifying. It sounded like the source was inches from the microphone. My phone charged on my nightstand right next to my head. I played it again. It has to be tight or it won't fit. The voice sounded genderless. It sounded like dead leaves skittering on pavement. I searched the apartment immediately. I checked the closets, the shower, the utility cupboard. Nothing. The windows were locked. The front door was dead bolted. I live alone. I told myself it was interference. Maybe the app picked up a radio frequency, a crossed line. I deleted the app. I went to work. But by the time I got home, the curiosity was eating me alive. I'm a data guy. Anomalies bother me. If it was interference, I could prove it. I re-downloaded the app. I also bought a standalone digital voice recorder, a high-end Sony model I used for meetings. I placed the phone on the nightstand and the Sony recorder on the floor, sliding it halfway under the bed. My bed is a heavy wooden frame that sits about 6 inches off the ground. Just enough space for dust bunnies and lost socks. Night 5. I didn't sleep well. I lay there listening to the settling of the building. Eventually, exhaustion took over. I woke up and went straight to the devices. The app showed 12 new events. The Sony recorder showed continuous audio, but marked spikes in decibels. I synced them up on my laptop. Event 1, 1:15 a.m. Me. Where are you going? Voice BR from under the bed. Just checking the seams. Go back to sleep, Caleb. I stopped the playback. I felt like I was going to throw up. It knew my name. The audio from the Sony recorder, the one on the floor, was clearer. The voice wasn't coming from the room. It was coming from above the recorder. It was coming from the underside of the mattress. I listened to the rest. It was a conversation, a long, mundane, terrifying conversation. 2:30 a.m. Me. Is it morning? Voice B. Not yet. 2 more hours. You need to rest the vessel. Me. Okay. 3:45 a.m. Me. It itches. Voice B. I know. The stretching is the hardest part. I'll apply more salve. Sound. A wet, slapping sound. Like raw meat being dropped on a counter. Slap. Slap. I stood up and backed away from the bed. I looked at the mattress. It was a standard memory foam mattress I'd bought online a year ago. I grabbed a pocket knife from my dresser. I stripped the sheets off. I flipped the mattress over. The underside was pristine. White fabric, no tears, no holes, no stains. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I pranking myself? Was I doing a ventriloquist act in my sleep? I decided to stay awake. Night 6. I drank 3 Red Bulls. I set up a camera on a tripod in the corner of the room, pointing at the bed. I sat in my gaming chair with the lights on, determined to catch this thing. 3 a.m. passed. 4 a.m. passed. Nothing happened. The room was silent. At 5 a.m., my eyes were burning. I blinked, just a long, slow blink. When I opened them, sunlight was streaming through the blinds. I panicked. I looked at the clock. 9:30 a.m. I had fallen asleep in the chair. I rushed to the camera. It was off. The battery was dead. That was impossible. I had plugged it into the wall AC adapter. I checked the outlet. The plug had been pulled. I checked the Sleep Speak app on my phone, which was still on the nightstand. 1 new event. Time, 5:02 a.m. 2 minutes after I closed my eyes. I pressed play. Voice B. He is trying to see us. Me. Voice sounded different, flatter. He is scared. Voice B. He should be. We are not ready for the transfer. The skin is still too tight around the shoulders. Me. I will eat more. Expand the surface area. Voice B. Good. Now, delete the video. I heard the sound of footsteps on the recording. My footsteps. The night grows deeper as we leave this story behind and move on to the next. I found letters from a dead tenant, and now they want an answer. The rent was suspiciously cheap. That should have been my first warning. But when your bank account reads 3 figures and the only alternative is your sister's couch, which already groans under the weight of her 2 toddlers and her patients, you learn to ignore red flags the size of bed sheets. The listing for the attic studio above Mrs. Gable's dusty antique shop on Elm Street promised charm, character, and quiet. It delivered the first 2 in spades. The quiet? That was the problem. It wasn't peaceful quiet. It was the thick, watchful silence of a held breath, the kind that presses on your eardrums until you hear your own pulse thudding in your skull. Moving in was a blur of boxes, sweat, and the pervasive smell of old wood, dust, and the faint, cloying sweetness of lavender that seeped up from the shop below. The studio itself was a long, narrow space under the eaves, with sloped ceilings that forced me to duck near the walls, and one small, grimy window overlooking the tangled alley behind the building. The previous tenant, the landlord Mr. Finch had mumbled offhandedly over the phone, had moved on suddenly. No forwarding address, just left the key under the mat. Finch, a man whose voice sounded like gravel in a tin can, hadn't even shown me the place. Keys in the mailbox, he'd rasped. First month's rent in cash. Slide it under my door. He sounded less like a landlord and more like a ghost, negotiating with another ghost. The first week was uneventful. Just the unfamiliar creaks and groans of an old building settling. The distant chime of the antique shop doorbell, the muffled sounds of the city below. I buried myself in freelance graphic design work, trying to ignore the way the shadows in the corners seemed deeper than they should be, the way the single overhead bulb flickered with a sickly yellow pulse if I stared at it too long. The quiet, however, began to fray at the edges of my concentration. It wasn't just absence of sound, it was an expectation. Like the room itself was waiting for me to say something, to acknowledge its presence. I found the letters on a Tuesday. Rain lashed against the small attic window, turning the alley into a gray watercolor smear. I was reorganizing a rickety old wardrobe, the only storage besides a few shelves, to make space for my winter coats. Behind a stack of yellowed, moth-eaten sweaters that smelled faintly of camphor, my fingers brushed against something smooth and cool, not fabric, paper, bundled together with a faded blue ribbon, stiff with age. It was a stack of letters, dozens of them, all addressed to a single name in a looping, elegant script that felt both feminine and strangely urgent: Eleanor Vance. The return address on every envelope was identical: 7 Blackwood Lane, apartment 3BA. My blood ran a degree colder. 7 Blackwood Lane was the address of this very building. Apartment 3B was my studio. The letters weren't postmarked. They hadn't been sent through the mail. They'd been hidden, left behind. My rational mind screamed, "Private property, throw them out, don't snoop." But the silence of the room seemed to lean in, pressing on my temples. Curiosity, that old fatal flaw, won. I sat cross-legged on the worn rug, the rain drumming a steady rhythm on the roof, and untied the ribbon. The first letter was dated October 12th, 1978. The paper was thin, fragile, the ink slightly blurred in places as if touched by damp fingers or tears. Dearest Eleanor, another night, another silence from you. The silence here is different now. It's not the quiet of an empty room. It's a listening quiet. The walls, they seem to hold their breath when I enter. The faucet in the sink drips a single drop at exactly 3:17 a.m. Every night I've tried tightening it. It doesn't help. I think it's counting. I found a hairpin today. Not mine. Silver with a tiny pearl. It was on the floorboards near the wardrobe, just like the one you lost last summer, remember? The one your mother gave you? I left it on the windowsill in case. Please, Ellie, if you're getting these, just write back. One word. Anything. I know you're angry. I know I shouldn't have, but I miss you so terribly. The silence is eating me alive. Yours, always. Thomas. My skin prickled. Thomas. The name felt heavy, loaded. I flipped to the next letter. October 18th. Ellie, the hairpin is gone. I checked the windowsill this morning. Vanished. But the dripping, it's faster now. 3:10 a.m. And there's a new sound, a scratching, inside the walls, like tiny fingernails, or maybe just mice. But it sounds deliberate, purposeful. I saw Mrs. Gable downstairs. She wouldn't meet my eyes, just clutched her rosary tighter and muttered about bad bones in the building. What does that mean? Do you know something, Ellie? Did you know what this place was before you left me here? I'm so tired. The silence isn't just in the room. It's in my head. It's shouting. Tale. The letters continued, a desperate, deteriorating chronicle over the next few weeks. Thomas wrote of cold spots that followed him, of the wardrobe door creaking open by itself in the dead of night, of finding his clothes neatly folded on the bed when he left them crumpled on the floor. He wrote of smelling lavender, Mrs. Gable's lavender, when the shop was closed. He wrote of seeing fleeting movements in his peripheral vision, of a woman's face, pale and sad, reflected for a split second in the dark window pane. He became convinced Eleanor was trying to communicate through the house itself, punishing him for some unnamed transgression. His handwriting grew increasingly frantic, the ink blotted and smeared. October 28th, 1978. She's here, Ellie, not you, her, the one from the window. She stands in the corner by the wardrobe now. I can feel her cold breath on my neck when I sleep. She doesn't speak. She just watches, waits. And the letters. I found another one today, tucked into the pages of the book I left on the nightstand. blank pages, just the envelope addressed to you. How? How? I think she wants me to write, to keep writing to you, to feed the silence with my words. But what if I stop? What if I burn these letters? Ta, October 30th, 1978. I can't sleep. The dripping is constant now. The scratching is inside the walls, inside my head. She stood over my bed last night. I felt her hand on my forehead, cold as marble. She whispered, "Write her." Her voice wasn't yours, Ellie. It was dry, like stones grinding in a deep well. I have to write. I have to answer. Maybe if I say I'm sorry enough, she'll let me go. Maybe if I tell you everything. The rest of the page was violently torn away, the ragged edge stained with something dark that wasn't ink. The final letter was undated. The paper was stiff, damp-stained, the handwriting a barely legible scrawl. The ink faded to a rusty brown. Eleanor, I know now. I know what you did. You left me here for her. You knew she hungers for voices, for words, for the sound of a living heart beating in her walls. You sacrificed me to keep her quiet, to keep her away from you. It's too late for sorry. The letters are her food. My words are her chains. She won't let me leave until I've written enough, until I've filled the silence with my misery, until it bursts. If you're reading this, if anyone is reading this, don't write back. Don't answer. She only wants a voice. Don't give her yours. Burn these. Burn them all before. The sentence ended in a long, jagged smear of that same rusty brown, as if the pen had been dragged violently across the page before being dropped. There was no signature, just the stain. I sat frozen on the rug, the rain forgotten. The silence in the attic studio wasn't just watchful anymore. It was hungry. Thomas Vance. He hadn't moved on. He'd vanished, died here, and his ghost, or the thing that had consumed him, was still here, trapped by his own unanswered letters. And I'd found them, I'd read them, I'd given the silence a voice again. The overhead bulb flickered violently, then died completely, plunging the room into gray twilight. The rain outside seemed to muffle, as if the world beyond the window had been wrapped in cotton wool. The only sound was my own ragged breathing, and a new sound, faint at first, a soft, rhythmic scratch, scratch, scratch from inside the wardrobe, like fingernails on wood, exactly as Thomas had described. My blood turned to ice. I scrambled back, knocking over the empty teacup I'd left on the rug. It shattered on the floorboards, the sound impossibly loud in the suffocating quiet. The scratching stopped. The silence slammed back down, heavier than before. Then a single fat drop of water hit the floor near my foot. Plink! From the ceiling, I looked up. The plaster was dry. Another drop fell. Plink! Then another. Plink! Forming a small dark puddle on the worn rug. Not water. It was thick, viscous, the same rusty brown as the stain on Thomas's final letter. From a corner by the wardrobe, the cold began. Not just cold air. A deep, bone-chilling cold that radiated outwards, frosting my breath in the dim light. And with it came the smell. Not lavender, not dust. The cloying sweetness of decay mixed with the metallic tang of old blood. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of waiting. A whisper, dry and papery, like dead leaves skittering across stone, seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It spoke Thomas's final desperate warning, but twisted, layered with a wet, guttural undertone. Don't answer? But it wasn't a command. It was a challenge, an invitation. The next morning, I tried to be rational. I gathered the letters, intending to burn them in the small rusted metal trash can I used for my sketch paper. I lit a match. The flame sputtered and died before it touched the paper. I tried again. Same thing. A third match snapped in my fingers. The letters felt unnaturally cold. I shoved them back into the wardrobe, deep behind the moth-eaten sweaters, my hands trembling. I told myself I was imagining things. Stress, sleep deprivation, the weight of the old building. That night, I woke at 3:10 a.m., not 3:17, 3:10. The dripping started. Plink, plink, plink. From the ceiling directly above my narrow bed, I lay rigid, eyes wide in the darkness, listening to the slow, deliberate drops of that dark fluid. The scratching began inside the wall beside my head. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Patient, insistent, waiting for a response. I lasted 3 days. 3 days of the dripping, the scratching, the bone-deep cold that followed me from room to room, the oppressive weight of the silence that seemed to press in tighter every time I opened my mouth to speak, only to find my words dying in my throat. The smell of decay clung to my clothes. Sleep was impossible. My work suffered. My hands shook constantly. The letters weren't just hidden, they were a beacon, and the thing in the walls had my name now. It knew I'd read them. It knew I understood. The breaking point came on the 4th night. I was sitting at my small desk, staring blankly at my computer screen, the cursor blinking accusingly. The silence was a physical pressure. The cold spot by the wardrobe had grown, filling half the room. The dripping was constant now, a slow, maddening rhythm from the ceiling. Plink, plink, plink. Then a new sound, a soft thump from inside the wardrobe, like something heavy being placed on the shelf. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I stood up, my legs weak, and walked slowly to the wardrobe. My hand shook as I grasped the tarnished brass knob. I pulled the door open. On the top shelf, placed with deliberate care on a folded yellowed handkerchief, was a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper, unlined, and a fountain pen. The same kind of pen, I realized with a fresh wave of terror, that Thomas had used. The pen was uncapped. A single drop of that same rusty brown ink hung precariously from its nib. My breath fogged in the freezing air. I didn't touch it. I just stared. The silence deepened, becoming a vacuum that sucked the air from my lungs. The whisper came, not dry this time, but wet, intimate, as if spoken directly into my ear. Right. It wasn't a suggestion. It was the only sound left in the world. The dripping, the scratching, the cold, all of it coalesced into that single, imperative word. Right. The pen seemed to pulse with a dark light. The blank paper was a void waiting to be filled. With what? An apology? A plea? Thomas's final warning screamed in my mind, "Don't answer. Don't give her yours." But the silence was so loud, the cold was so deep, the weight of Thomas's unanswered pain, trapped for nearly 50 years, pressed down on me. Maybe if I wrote, I could set him free. Maybe I could reason with it. Maybe I could be the voice that finally said the right thing, the words that would break the chain. My hand moved before my mind could stop it. I picked up the pen. It was ice cold, heavy, vibrating faintly with a deep subterranean hum. The ink on the nib smelled like copper and earth. I sat at my desk, the blank paper before me. The dripping stopped. The scratching stopped. The silence held its breath, waiting for my words. I pressed the nib to the paper. The ink flowed smoothly, dark and rich. My own handwriting, usually neat and precise, seemed to twist and warp under its influence, becoming loopy, frantic, eerily reminiscent of Thomas's final scrawl. "I found your letters." The words wrote themselves. I couldn't stop them. The pen moved with a will of its own, dragging my hand across the page. I read them all. I know about the dripping, the scratching, the cold. I know about her. I know you're trapped. I'm so sorry, Thomas. I'm so sorry she did this to you. Tears blurred my vision, hot against my cold cheeks. The pen kept moving, but I can't stay silent. The silence is killing me too. It's eating my thoughts, my sleep, my voice. Please, if you can hear me, tell me how to make it stop. Tell me what she wants. What do I need to say to set you both free? I signed it with my own name, my real name. The pen lifted from the paper. The silence shattered, not with sound, but with a wave of pure, ecstatic relief that washed over me, warm and suffocating. The cold vanished. The oppressive weight lifted. For a moment, the attic studio felt almost normal. Hope, fragile and dangerous, flickered in my chest. Had I done it? Had I broken the cycle? Then the pen moved again. Not in my hand. It floated up from the desk, hovering in the air before the paper. The nib dipped into the inkwell that hadn't been there a moment before, a small, ornate well that seemed carved from black stone, and it began to write, not in Thomas's hand, in a script that was sharp, angular, and chillingly precise, a woman's hand, Eleanor's hand. "Dear, my name, thank you for your kind words. It is so lovely to be heard again after all this time. Thomas was a foolish boy. He ran from his promises. He left me hungry. But you are different. You understand. You offer your voice willfully. That is a gift." She is pleased. She has waited so long for a new voice, one that is strong, one that can fill the silence for a very, very long time. Your letter is accepted. The answer is simple. Stay. Write to us again tomorrow night and every night after. Fill the pages with your fear, your regrets, your loneliness. She feasts on those most. We are waiting. Eleanor and she. The pen dropped onto the desk with a soft clatter. The black inkwell vanished. The dripping started again, not from the ceiling, from the letter itself. Thick, dark drops of that rusty fluid pooled on the cream paper, smudging the words, making them bleed and run like open wounds. Stay, stay, stay. The cold returned, colder than ever before. It wasn't just in the room. It was inside me, seeping into my bones, into the marrow of my fear. The whisper wasn't just in my ear anymore. It was in my head, in my blood. A chorus of two voices now, Thomas's desperate murmur and Eleanor's sharp, satisfied hiss, repeating the same words over and over. Stay, write, feed us. I tried to scream. No sound came out. My voice was already gone, claimed by the silence, promised to the thing in the walls. I looked at the wardrobe. It was open. Inside, on the floorboards where I'd found the letters, lay a fresh stack of cream-colored paper and a new bottle of that black, stone-carved inkwell, waiting. The scratching began again, not inside the wall, but inside my own skull, a constant, maddening rhythm. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound of my own thoughts being unraveled, prepared to be written down. The dripping formed a puddle around my bare feet on the floor, cold, wet, final. I don't sleep anymore. I sit at the desk. The pen is always in my hand. The paper is always waiting. The silence is never empty. It's full of her, full of Thomas, full of Eleanor, full of the hungry ancient thing that wears their names like a shroud. They watch me from the corners, from the wardrobe, from the very grain of the wood in the floorboards. Their eyes are the dark spots on the ceiling. Their breath is the cold that never leaves. I write about my terror, about the way the cold feels like worms burrowing under my skin, about the smell of decay that is now my own breath, about the dreams of Thomas, trapped in a room with walls made of his own unanswered letters, screaming silently as she peels the words from his soul. I write about Eleanor's cold satisfaction, her sharp eyes gleaming in the dark. I write about the landlord Finch, who knew, who left me here as an offering. I write about Mrs. Gable's lavender trying to mask the stench of the grave that rises from apartment 3B. They are never satisfied. The pages I fill vanish by morning, absorbed into the walls, feeding the silence, making it deeper, hungrier. I need more paper, more ink. My hands are stained brown. My eyes are sunken pits. The dripping is constant now, a small dark pool spreading across the floorboards around my chair. I drink it. It tastes like rust and regret. It keeps me awake. It keeps me writing. The pen moves. My hand is a puppet. The words flow. The silence grows. She is pleased. Thomas is quiet now. His hunger is sated by my voice. Eleanor watches, a ghost of a smile on her pale lips. And the thing that is neither of them, the ancient hunger in the bones of the house, stirs in its deep, dark place, content for now. But it will never be full. It will always need more words, more fear, more voice. I found the letters. I read them. I answered. And now I am the answer. My life, my breath, my very soul is the ink. The paper is the walls. The story is never finished. It only grows longer, darker, deeper into the silence. The rent is cheap for a reason. The attic studio doesn't need a tenant. It needs a scribe, a voice for the hungry dark. And I am writing. I am always writing. The scratching in the walls is just the sound of the house turning the pages, waiting for the next word, the next drop of blood ink, the next piece of my silence to devour. I can't stop. The pen won't let me. The silence demands its due. And I am so very tired, but the dripping hasn't stopped, and the cold hasn't lifted. So I write. I write until my fingers bleed onto the page, mixing with the ink. I write until my eyes blur. I write until the only sound left in the world is the scratch of the nib and the wet, satisfied sigh from the corner by the wardrobe. She is listening. She is waiting. And I am still here, still writing, still feeding the silence that will one day swallow me whole, leaving only these words behind, waiting for the next tenant to find them and answer. That concludes this story. A new one begins now. I rented a cheap room in an abandoned house at the edge of town. I found the listing at 2 a.m, when everything feels reasonable and nothing feels permanent. The photos were grainy, the description short. Room for rent. Quiet. Cash preferred. The price was less than half of anything else I'd seen. The address was at the far edge of town, where the streetlights thin out and the sidewalks crack and then simply stop. I told myself the cheap rent explained everything. I told myself the pictures looked empty because the owner valued privacy. I told myself I needed a place to sleep, not a place to live. When I drove out there the next afternoon, the sky was low and gray, the kind that presses down on you like a held breath. The house sat back from the road, half hidden by trees that had grown wild and unchecked. It wasn't burned or collapsed. It wasn't obviously ruined. It was just tired. The paint had peeled in long strips, exposing older colors beneath, like layers of old skin. The windows were intact, but dark, as if the light inside had been turned off a long time ago and forgotten. A man answered the door after I knocked twice. He was thin, older than I'd expected, with a face that looked carved instead of aged. He didn't give me his name. He didn't ask for mine. He took the cash, counted it carefully, and handed me a key that felt warm, as if it had been in his pocket for a long time. "Room's upstairs," he said. "Second door on the left. Don't use the back hallway." I asked why. He looked past me down the road and said, "It doesn't go where you think." That should have been the moment I left. Instead, I nodded like I understood, like it was a joke, like everything was normal. Inside, the house smelled of dust and something faintly sweet, like old flowers pressed between the pages. The floors creaked under my shoes, not sharply, but with a long, tired groan, as if the house needed time to acknowledge each step. The air was cool, despite the broken thermostat on the wall. No pictures hung anywhere, no mirrors. The walls were bare, marked only by faint outlines where something had once been and then removed. My room was exactly what the listing promised. A bed, a dresser, a single lamp. The window faced the trees, their branches close enough to brush the glass when the wind picked up. The door locked, the walls were thin. That first night, I slept hard. The kind of sleep that comes from exhaustion and relief. I didn't dream. I didn't move. I woke up in the dark with the sense that something had changed. It took me a few seconds to realize what it was. The house was breathing, not like pipes knocking or wood settling. This was slower, a deep, rhythmic sound rising and falling as if the structure itself had lungs. I lay still, listening. With each breath, the air in my room seemed to shift just slightly, like a tide pulling back and forth. I told myself it was the wind. The trees were close. Old houses make noises. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. They were soft, careful, bare feet by the sound of it. Someone walking slowly, stopping every few steps, then continuing. The steps reached my door and paused. I held my breath. The handle didn't move. Whoever it was stood there for a long moment, close enough that I could hear a faint, wet sound, like someone breathing through their mouth. Then the footsteps moved on, down the hall, toward the stairs. In the morning, the house was quiet and ordinary again. The breathing was gone. The air smelled like dust and nothing else. I told myself I'd imagined it. I went to work. I came back that evening with groceries and a determination not to let my nerves get the better of me. That night, the footsteps returned. This time, there were more of them. They didn't move like people going somewhere. They wandered. They doubled back. Sometimes they stopped outside my door. Sometimes they gathered near the top of the stairs, a cluster of soft sounds overlapping and separating again. I pressed my ear to the wall and heard whispering, not words, just breath shaped into something that almost meant something. A chorus of near sounds, like a language spoken underwater. On the third night, I started hearing it during the day. A faint scratching behind the walls, like fingernails dragging slowly across wood. It followed me from room to room. When I stood still, it stopped. When I moved, it resumed, keeping pace. I tried to find the landlord. His room at the end of the hall was locked. I knocked. No answer. I listened at the door and heard nothing at all, not even breathing. That night, I dreamed I was standing in the back hallway. In the dream, the hallway was longer than it should have been. The walls bowed inward, the ceiling low enough that I had to duck. Doors lined both sides, each one slightly ajar, each one breathing softly. I walked past them, drawn forward by something I couldn't see. At the end of the hallway was a door without a handle. I woke up standing in my room, my hand pressed flat against the wall, right where the scratching usually came from. The wall was warm. I pulled my hand away and stared at my palm. For a second, I could swear there was a faint pattern there, like the impression of veins that weren't mine. I stopped sleeping after that. When you don't sleep, everything stretches. Time becomes thick and sticky. Sounds get louder. Shadows feel heavier. The house took advantage of that. It started doing things when I was tired enough to doubt myself. Doors I locked would be open in the morning. Objects would be moved just slightly, never enough to be obvious, but enough that I noticed. The dresser drawer would be pulled out an inch. The lamp would be turned to face the wall. The breathing came back. Stronger now. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, a slow inhalation that made the walls flex, followed by an exhale that rattled. The windows. One night, the footsteps didn't stop at my door. The handle turned slowly, carefully, as if whoever was on the other side knew exactly how much pressure to use. I watched it move, inch by inch, until the latch clicked. The door opened just a crack. I couldn't see anything in the hallway. The darkness there was deeper than the darkness in my room, a solid thing that swallowed the light. From within, it came the smell I'd noticed on my first day. Stronger now. Old flowers, rot. Something lived in and wrong. A hand slid through the gap. It was pale, almost translucent. The skin stretched thin over bones that looked too long. The fingers bent the wrong way at the joints, curling inward like hooks. It rested on the doorframe, and I felt a pressure in my chest, as if something was leaning on me from the inside. Then a voice spoke from the hallway. It sounded like mine. It said my name the way I say it when I'm alone, quietly, just to hear it. I don't remember screaming. I remember the door slamming shut. I remember the lock turning. I remember sitting on the bed until morning, my back against the wall, my eyes burning. The next day, I packed my things. As I carried my bags down the stairs, I noticed something I hadn't before. The walls were marked with faint handprints, overlapping and smeared, all at about chest height. They led toward the back hallway. I stood at the entrance to it for a long time. The air there was colder. The breathing was loudest here, a deep, satisfied rhythm. The hallway was dark, but not empty. I could feel it watching me, waiting for me to understand. I left without saying goodbye. I didn't get far. Halfway down the driveway, I realized I was still holding the key. It was warm in my hand, warmer than it should have been. Without thinking, I turned around to throw it back. The house was closer than it had been before. The trees leaned inward, their branches interlaced above the roof like fingers locking together. The windows were no longer dark. They glowed faintly, each one pulsing in time with the breathing. The front door was open. I woke up in my room. My bags were unpacked, my clothes folded neatly in the dresser. The door was locked. From the hallway came the sound of footsteps moving toward me, confident now, unafraid. I understood then. The room wasn't for rent. It was a mouth, and I had finally stopped pretending I didn't know what it was hungry for. This is where the story ends. Let's continue with the next. I rented a room from Craigslist that has no photos. $350 a month. In this economy, in this city, that number doesn't imply a bargain. It implies a crime scene. I knew that. I wasn't naive. But when you're 3 months behind on student loans and your freelance graphic design gig has dried up into a desert of unanswered emails, you stop looking for red flags and start looking for a roof. The listing on Craigslist had no photos, just text, room for let, large historic home, East 4th Street, quiet, cash only. I met the landlord, Mr. Giles, on a Tuesday evening. It was raining, that heavy, cold November rain that smells like rusted metal and wet asphalt. The house was a looming Victorian thing, painted a peeling, sickly yellow that looked like bruised skin under the streetlights. It sat on a corner lot, overgrown with ivy that had choked the life out of the porch railings. Giles was a small man, nervous, smelling of mothballs and peppermint schnapps. He didn't look me in the eye. He handed me the keys after counting my cash with shaking fingers. "You're the only one here right now," he mumbled, looking at the dark windows of the second floor. "Other tenant left. Quickly. Keeps to himself mostly anyway. It's quiet. You'll like the quiet." I didn't ask why the other tenant left. I just wanted the key. My room was on the first floor at the back of the hallway, past the grand staircase that groaned even when you just looked at it. The room was big, I'll give it that. High ceilings, crown molding that was thick with decades of painted-over dust, and a single, large window that looked out onto a backyard that was essentially a mud pit filled with brambles. I moved in that night. I had 2 suitcases, a sleeping bag, a laptop, and a box of ramen. I set up my office on a card table I found in the closet. The closet was weirdly deep, smelling of cedar and something sweeter, like rotting apples. I closed the door and pushed the table against the opposite wall. The first 3 nights were fine. It was just the adjustment period. Old houses make noise. They settle. Wood contracts in the cold. Pipes hammer when the heat kicks on. I told myself this every time the floorboards above my head creaked. Just the house settling. But the settling had a rhythm. It started on the 4th night. I was working late, trying to salvage a logo design for a client who hated everything I did. It was 2 a.m. The silence in the house was heavy, the kind of silence that feels like pressure in your ears. Thump. It came from directly above me, a soft, dull impact, like a bag of wet sand dropped on the floor. I froze, my hand hovering over the mouse. I waited. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Something was being dragged. It was slow, agonizingly slow. It sounded like fabric moving over rough wood. It moved from the center of the room above to the corner. Then it stopped. "Hello?" I called out, feeling stupid immediately. "Is someone up there?" Silence. I assumed it was the other tenant Giles had mentioned, though I hadn't seen a single sign of life. No mail in the hallway, no boots by the door, no lights in the upstairs windows when I came home. I put my headphones on, turned up the white noise playlist, and went to sleep. The next day, I went upstairs. I told myself I just wanted to introduce myself, to ask them to keep it down at night. The staircase was freezing. The air got colder with every step. At the top of the landing, there were 3 doors. 2 were open, revealing empty bedrooms with bare mattresses and dust motes dancing in the gray afternoon light. The 3rd door, directly above my room, was closed. I knocked. The wood felt damp, sticky. "Hello? Neighbor?" No answer. I knocked harder. The door rattled in its frame. It was locked. Not just locked, but jammed. I tried the handle and it didn't give a millimeter. I put my ear to the wood. I heard breathing. It wasn't normal. Breathing. It was wet, rattling. A slow, labored intake of air followed by a gurgling exhale. It sounded like someone with pneumonia or someone drowning very, very slowly. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. The breathing stopped instantly. I backed away. "Okay, sorry to bother you." I retreated to my room and locked the door. I called Giles. It went straight to voicemail. I texted him, "Hey, I think the guy upstairs is sick. He sounds bad." Giles never replied. A week passed. The noises changed. The thumping stopped, replaced by pacing, relentless pacing. It would start at midnight and go until 4 in the morning. Creak, step, creak, step. It was a heavy, limping gait. One foot would land solid, the other would drag. I stopped sleeping. I started drinking too much coffee. My work suffered. I found myself staring at the ceiling, tracing the water stains that looked like maps of countries that didn't exist. One particularly bad stain was right above my bed. It was dark brown, almost black in the center. I noticed it was getting bigger. On a Tuesday, exactly 2 weeks after moving in, the smell started. It wasn't a garbage smell. It was meaty. It smelled like raw copper and spoiled pork. It permeated everything, my clothes, my sheets, my hair. I bought air fresheners, candles, incense. Nothing touched it. It was coming from the ceiling. I went to the hardware store and bought a step ladder. I needed to see if a pipe had burst or if an animal had died in the crawl space between the floors. I set the ladder up under the dark stain. I poked it with the handle of a broom. The plaster was soft, spongy, drip. A single drop of dark, viscous fluid landed on my cheek. I wiped it off, panicked, scrubbing my face with my shirt. It was red, not bright red, but dark, maroon blood, old blood. I scrambled down the ladder and ran to the bathroom to wash my face. I scrubbed until my skin was raw. When I came back out, I looked up at the ceiling. The stain was pulsing. I swear to God it was expanding and contracting like a slow heartbeat. I should have left then. I should have packed my bags and slept under a bridge. But I was broke. I had $40 to my name until the next invoice cleared. I had nowhere to go. Logic is a dangerous thing when you're desperate. I rationalized it. It's a dead raccoon, I told myself. Fluids leak. Gravity pulls them down. It's disgusting, but it's physics, not ghosts. I taped a garbage bag over the ceiling stain to catch the drips and moved my bed to the other side of the room. That night, the house woke me up. It wasn't a sound. It was a change in pressure. My ears popped. I sat up, heart hammering against my ribs. The room was pitch black. The street lamp outside had burned out. I heard a sound from the corner of the room. The closet, the door, which I always kept latched shut because of the smell, was clicking. The latch was lifting. Click. The door creaked open about an inch. I held my breath. I reached for my phone on the nightstand to use the flashlight, but my hand knocked it off. It hit the floor with a loud clatter. From the closet, a voice whispered. It was my voice. "Who's there?" the closet whispered. It was a perfect recording of me asking that question the first night. The same inflection, the same tremor. I couldn't breathe. My throat seized up. "Is someone up there?" the closet voice asked, my voice again. Then a low, wet giggle, a sound I had never made. I lunged for the lamp switch. The bulb flashed once and blew out with a pop. Darkness again. "Giles," the voice said, but it wasn't my voice anymore. It was the landlord's. "Tenant left quickly." I scrambled out of bed, tangled in the sheets, and fell hard onto the floor. I crawled toward the hallway door. The closet door slammed open. It hit the wall with enough force to crack the plaster. I didn't look back. I got the hallway door open and sprinted. I didn't grab my laptop. I didn't grab my shoes. I ran out in my boxers and t-shirt, barefoot onto the cold, splintery floor of the hallway. I made it to the front door, locked. I fumbled with the deadbolt. My fingers were slippery with sweat. From the top of the stairs behind me, the breathing started. That wet pneumonia rattle, it was loud. Whatever was making it wasn't behind a door anymore. It was on the landing. I got the bolt violently thrown back and ripped the door open. I burst out onto the porch, gasped cold night air. I ran down East 4th Street until my feet were bleeding and my lungs burned. I ran until I saw the fluorescent lights of a 24-hour gas station. I collapsed inside, crying, shaking so hard the attendant called the police. I told him someone had broken in. I didn't tell them about the voice. I didn't tell them about the blood. They wouldn't believe me. The police went to the house. They called me an hour later. "Mr. Evans," the officer said, sounding annoyed. "We checked the place. It's secure. No sign of entry, but we need you to come down here." "I'm not going back there," I said. "Sir, you need to explain what's in the upstairs room." "I don't know," I sobbed. "I've never been in there. The door was locked." "The door wasn't locked," the officer said. "And there's no floor in that room, sir. It's just open joists. Looks like it's been that way for years. But we found your things." "My things are downstairs," I said. "No," the officer said, his voice dropping an octave. "We found your laptop, your clothes, and your sleeping bag. They were arranged in the center of the upstairs room on top of some plywood planks, laid out like a little nest." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I never put them there. And, sir," the officer hesitated, "Mr. Giles, we looked him up to contact the owner. David Giles died 3 years ago. The house has been in foreclosure. It's been abandoned since 2021. I hung up. I slept in a shelter that night. I borrowed money from my estranged sister the next day and got a bus ticket out of state. I left everything, my computer, my clothes, my identity. But sometimes, when I'm in a quiet room or when I'm staying in a cheap motel and the ventilation turns off, I can still hear it. Not the breathing. I hear the recording. I hear me, whispering from the walls. "You'll like the quiet," it says. "You'll like the quiet." And that ends this story. A new one starts now. I rented an apartment where no one stays longer than one night. The listing was absurd. A one-bedroom apartment in the heart of the city, walking distance to everything, with high ceilings and hardwood floors, available immediately for $450 a month. In this market, it had to be a scam or a trap. But my savings were evaporating faster than morning fog after the hospital job fell through, and my old place had been condemned after the fire. Desperation has a way of sanding down good sense. I clicked reply. The landlord, Mr. Eris Thorne, didn't ask for references, didn't run a credit check. He met me in front of 17B Elmwood Court, a crumbling brick building sandwiched between a shuttered laundromat and a pawn shop with barred windows. Thorne was a gaunt man in a threadbare suit that might have been dark blue once. His hands trembled slightly as he fumbled with an enormous tarnished key ring. His eyes darted everywhere but mine. "Lease is month to month," he rasped, the words dry as dead leaves. "Cash only, no deposit, no utilities included. You pay the meter yourself." He slid a single sheet of paper across the hood of his rusted sedan. The terms were sparse, the blanks for my name and signature glaringly empty. Just sign here, today's rent, and you can move right in. He avoided the building's entrance, gesturing vaguely towards the door with his chin. "Apartment 3B, top floor, back stairs." He practically shoved the key, a heavy, old-fashioned skeleton key with a worn brass head, into my palm. It was ice cold. "Welcome home," he muttered, already retreating to his car before I could ask why the rent was impossibly low. As he drove off, I saw him cross himself in the rearview mirror. The building smelled of damp plaster, stale cigarette smoke, and something else. A faint, sweetish odor, like overripe peaches left in a closed cupboard. The lobby was dim, lit by a single bare bulb dangling from a frayed wire. Post boxes lined one wall, most hanging open and empty. The back stairs were narrower than the front, carpeted in a threadbare, once-red runner that smelled faintly of mildew. The third-floor hallway was darker still. Only 2 apartments up here. 3A's door was covered in thick, yellowed newspaper taped over the peephole and cracks around the frame. 3B, mine, looked untouched. The lock was stiff, the door groaning open to reveal a surprisingly spacious room. High ceilings, yes. Original hardwood floors, scuffed but solid. A large window overlooking the tangled, overgrown courtyard. The kitchenette was cramped but functional. The bathroom had a clawfoot tub. It was dusty, neglected, but fundamentally sound, and so cheap. Relief washed over me, momentarily drowning out the building's unsettling smell. I'd found a lifeline. I hauled my few boxes up the back stairs as dusk fell. The streetlights outside cast long, distorted shadows through the grimy window. I swept and mopped, aired out the stale air, made the narrow bed in the corner. It felt good to be settled, safe. As I unpacked my meager kitchenware, I noticed something odd. The single overhead light in the main room flickered erratically. Not a bulb issue. I'd replaced it with a new one I'd brought. It pulsed, dimming and brightening like a slow, tired heartbeat. I tapped the fixture. It steadied. Probably just old wiring. The first disturbance came around 11:30 p.m. I was reading in bed, the only light coming from my small desk lamp. A sound from the kitchen, a soft clink, like a spoon tapping against a glass. I froze, listened. Silence. Probably just the building settling, old pipes. I dismissed it, turning a page. Then a low thump from the bathroom. Not a drip. A deliberate, heavy sound, like something being set down on the porcelain sink. My skin prickled. I called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded thin and ridiculous in the stillness. No answer. Just the oppressive quiet of the old building. I grabbed my phone, flashlight, app on, and crept into the kitchen. Nothing out of place. The sink was dry. The bathroom door was closed. I pushed it open. The small room was empty. The old mirror above the sink was fogged, as if someone had just taken a hot shower, but the air was cool. I wiped the mirror with my sleeve. Staring back at me wasn't my own wide-eyed reflection. For a fraction of a second, I saw a woman's face, a pale oval, dark circles under the eyes, lips parted in a silent gasp. Then it vanished, leaving only my own startled face and the words, "Get out," smeared in the condensation where her mouth had been. I slammed the bathroom door shut, leaning against it, heart hammering. Hallucination, stress, lack of sleep. I repeated the words like a mantra. I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, back against the wall, phone clutched like a talisman, the desk lamp blazing. The flickering overhead light had gone dark. Around 2:17 a.m., the exact time my phone glowed, the temperature plummeted. My breath fogged in the sharp artificial light. The sweet, cloying smell of overripe peaches filled the air, thick and nauseating. From the hallway outside my door came a slow, deliberate, dragging sound. Scrape, thud, scrape, thud, like something heavy being pulled down the hall. It stopped right outside my door. Silence. Then a soft, wet tap, tap, tap on the wood. Not a knock, a fingernail. I held my breath. The tapping stopped. The dragging sound started again, moving away towards the stairs. I peeked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but on the worn carpet directly opposite my door, a trail of dark, wet footprints led away, fading after a few steps. Dawn brought weak, gray light and a fragile sense of safety. I called Mr. Thorne. It went straight to voicemail. I left 3 increasingly frantic messages. No reply. I needed coffee. I needed air. I locked the apartment, taking the heavy brass key with me, and headed down the back stairs. On the 2nd floor. Landing, I almost tripped over a small discarded object. A child's hair ribbon, faded blue satin, slightly damp. I picked it up. It smelled faintly of that same sickly, sweet peach odor. I dropped it like it was hot. Downstairs, the lobby was empty. I went next door to the pawn shop, buzzing with nervous energy. The owner, a burly man with tattooed knuckles named Sal, wiped his counter with a rag that looked dirtier than what he was cleaning. "Elmwood Court?" he snorted when I asked about the building. "That place? Yeah, I know it. Bad bones." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Landlord Thorne? Poor bastard's terrified of his own building. Won't set foot above the 2nd floor. Says the top floor. It's got a taste." He tapped the side of his nose. "Apartment 3B? Honey, nobody stays in 3B. Not one night. Ever. They check in, they check out before sunrise. Sometimes they don't even take their suitcases. Just run." He saw my face. "You just move in last night? Jesus, get out. Now, while it's still light, don't wait for dark. That thing, it doesn't like being alone. It gets hungry after dark." My blood ran cold. The hair ribbon, the footprints, the face in the mirror. It wasn't stress. It was real. I ran back to 3B, fumbling the key into the lock. I had to pack, get out. Sal's words echoed, "It gets hungry after dark." I threw clothes into my duffel bag, my hands shaking. As I pulled a sweater from the closet, something fluttered to the floor. A piece of notepaper, yellowed and brittle. In a spidery, frantic hand it read, "It wants to be seen. It hates the dark. Don't let it trap you in the dark. The key is the only way." Below that, scribbled over and over like a desperate chant, "Don't sleep, don't sleep, don't sleep." The overhead light flickered violently, once, twice, then died completely, plunging her room into gloom. The sweet peach smell surged, thick enough to choke on. From the bathroom, the dripping started. Plink, plink, plink. But the faucet was off. I knew it was off. The dripping grew louder, faster, echoing unnaturally in the small space. Plink, 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 plink. And beneath it, a wet, gurgling sigh like water draining from a clogged sink. I backed towards the door, my duffel bag forgotten on the bed. The doorknob was freezing cold under my hand. I turned it. It wouldn't budge. Locked from the outside? Impossible. I'd just unlocked it. I rattled the handle. Nothing. The dripping stopped. The sighing stopped. Absolute silence. Then a soft click from the bathroom door. It swung slowly open. Darkness yawned beyond the threshold, but not empty darkness. A shape stood there, backlit by the weak gray light from the bathroom window, tall, too tall for the low-ceilinged room. Its limbs seemed elongated, jointed wrong. It didn't have a distinct head, just a smooth, featureless oval that caught the faint light like wet stone. In one long, thin hand, it held something dark and wet that dripped steadily onto the floorboards. Plink. The sweet smell intensified, now mixed with the coppery tang of blood. It took a step forward, silent except for the drip of that dark substance. The featureless head tilted. It didn't have eyes, but I felt its attention fix on me like a physical weight. A low, wet vibration filled the air, not a sound, but a tremor in my bones, a hunger that had nothing to do with food. Panic shattered my paralysis. I threw my shoulder against the apartment door. Once, twice. Wood splintered around the lock. I stumbled out into the hallway, slamming the door shut behind me. I fumbled for the key, my fingers numb with terror. I jammed it into the lock and turned. Click. I sagged against the wall, gasping, listening. Silence from inside 3B. No scratching, no dripping, just the frantic pounding of my own heart. I'd locked it in. I had to get out. Downstairs. Now. I fled down the back stairs, taking them two at a time. The building felt watchful. The shadows in the corners deeper than they should be. I burst out into the gray afternoon light, blinking. I needed to find Thorne, get my money back, get far away. I ran towards the street corner where I'd seen his car parked the day before. It was gone? Of course it was gone. I ducked into a dingy internet cafe a block over, my hands still trembling. I pulled up the listing for 17B Elmwood Court. It was gone, deleted, vanished from every rental site. A cold certainty settled over me. Thorne hadn't just rented me an apartment. He'd fed me to it. I couldn't stay out. I had nowhere else to go. My savings were almost gone. The cafe closed at 9 p.m. As dusk bled into the bruised purple of twilight, dread became a physical ache in my chest. I stood across the street from Elmwood Court, watching the windows of 3B, dark. All of them. The street lights flickered on, casting long, grasping shadows. I had to go back. Just for tonight. Just to get my things. I'd stay up all night. I'd be gone by dawn. Sal's words haunted me. Nobody stays in 3B, not one night. The back stairs were darker than before. The sweet peach smell was stronger here, clinging to the air. The door to 3B was unlocked. I'd left it locked. I pushed it open slowly. The apartment was cold, colder than outside. The overhead light was dead. The only illumination came from the street lamp outside the window, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe on the walls. My duffel bag sat exactly where I'd left it on the bed. My unpacked boxes were undisturbed, but the furniture, it was rearranged. The small table and two chairs were pushed against the far wall, stacked precariously. The armchair was shoved into the corner facing the wall, and the bed had been dragged into the very center of the room, positioned directly under the flickering light fixture. The sheets were pulled tight, smooth, inviting. On the pillow lay the faded blue hair ribbon, my breath fogged in the freezing air. It wants to be seen. It hates the dark. The note, the key. I clutched the cold brass key in my pocket. The key is the only way. Way out or way in? The dripping started again, not from the bathroom this time, from the ceiling above the bed. Plink, a single fat drop of dark liquid landed on the pristine white sheet. Plink, another. Plink. It wasn't water. It was thick, viscous. The smell of peaches and blood was overwhelming. From the deepest shadow in the corner where the armchair had been, a sound began. Not dripping, not sighing, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails on wood, slow, patient, waiting. The shadow began to deepen, to coalesce. The tall, elongated shape detached itself from the wall. It didn't walk. It flowed, silent except for the endless tap, tap, tap of its long fingers against its own thigh. It stopped at the foot of the bed, the dark liquid still dripping from its unseen hand onto the sheet. The featureless head turned towards me. The wet vibration filled the room again, stronger now, hungrier. It reached out one long, dripping arm towards the bed, towards the smooth sheets, towards the space beside the pillow where the blue ribbon lay. The command wasn't spoken. It was implanted directly into my mind, cold and absolute, cutting through my terror. Lie down. My legs moved, not of my own will, step by step, drawn towards the bed like iron to a magnet. My body felt heavy, sluggish, responding to a will not my own. The cold intensified, seeping into my bones. The sweet, cloying smell filled my nose, my mouth. The tap, tap, tap grew louder, synchronizing with the frantic pounding of my heart. I reached the side of the bed. The sheets looked impossibly soft. The pillow looked warm. The vibration wasn't just hunger anymore. It was comfort, a promise of rest, an end to the running. The fear that had been a constant drumbeat since I stepped into this building began to soften, to blur at the edges. The cold wasn't unpleasant anymore. It was soothing, like sinking into deep, still water. Lie down. The thought was gentle now, seducing. Rest, be still, be seen. My knees touched the edge of the mattress. My hand brushed the damp sheet. The blue ribbon felt like silk against my fingertips. The shadowy figure stood motionless at the foot of the bed, waiting, patient. Its dripping hand hung loosely at its side. The streetlight outside flickered, casting its long shadow across the room, stretching towards me like a beckoning finger. The tap, tap, tap slowed, softened, became a lullaby. I'm writing this by the dim, flickering light of the dying overhead bulb. It's 3:07 a.m. The sheet beneath me is cold and damp. The sweet smell is everywhere. The shadow sits at the foot of the bed now, a silent sentinel. Its long fingers rest on the mattress near my feet. The dripping has stopped. The tapping has stopped. There is only the soft, wet vibration in the air, a deep, resonant hum that seems to come from the building's bones, from the bed frame itself. It's not frightening anymore. It's familiar, like a heartbeat I'd forgotten I had. Mr. Thorne will be coming soon. He always comes just before dawn to collect the key from under the mat. He won't find it. I won't be leaving, not this time. The apartment doesn't want me to leave. It has what it needs now. A witness, a companion in the dark. It hates being alone. It hates the dark. But I see it now. I see it clearly in the shadows, and in return, it lets me rest. The bed is so very comfortable. The cold is so very deep. The vibration is so very quiet. I understand now why no one stays longer than one night. They all ran before it could show them the comfort of the stillness, before it could show them the peace of being seen. The light is flickering faster, dying. Soon the street lamp outside will go out too. The true dark will come, and in the dark it will lean closer. Its featureless face will hover near mine. It will share its silence, its stillness, its endless, hungry watch. I won't mind. I won't be afraid. I won't be alone. The key is cold in my hand where I clutch it against my chest. I don't need it anymore. There are no doors left to unlock, no doors left to lock. I close my eyes. The vibration deepens, filling my skull, my bones, my blood. It's not a sound. It's the sound of the building breathing, the sound of the dark. Finally satisfied, the last flicker of light dies. The shadows rush in, thick and warm as grave soil, and in the perfect, silent dark, the thing at the foot of the bed finally stops waiting. Its long, cold fingers brush my ankle. A sigh escapes its smooth, wet stone face. A sigh of relief, a sigh of homecoming. I don't pull away. I sink deeper into the mattress. The bed isn't in the center of the room anymore. The room has shrunk. Or perhaps I have. It doesn't matter. The tapping has started again, softly, rhythmically, on the headboard. Tap, tap, tap. Not a warning, an invitation. I open my mouth, not to scream, to answer. My voice is a dry whisper, lost in the deep, contented hum of the dark. I see you. I breathe into the perfect waiting silence. The fingers tighten gently on my ankle. The vibration swells, warm and heavy as a blanket pulled up to my chin. Dawn won't come for me. Dawn is for those who sleep alone. I close my eyes. The bed is so very warm now. The dark is so very bright. And I will never, ever have to leave. The tapping slows, fades, becomes the steady, comforting beat of my own heart. Finally at rest. The apartment is full. The hunger is quiet. And I am home. This story has come to an end. Let's start the next. I thought the footsteps upstairs were my sister until I remembered I'm alone. The keys felt unnaturally heavy in my palm when Mrs. Gable pressed them into my hand. "The top floor," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes darting toward the sagging porch roof of the old duplex. "Rent's cheap for a reason, dear. Previous tenant? Well, she left in a hurry, left most everything behind. She wouldn't meet my gaze, focusing instead on smoothing her flowered apron. Just mind the stairs. They're steep, and the attic door at the top. Keep it locked, always locked. When I asked why, she just shook her head, a brittle smile cracking her lips. Some houses hold on to things. This one holds on to footsteps. She hurried back to her immaculate bungalow next door, leaving me standing alone on the cracked sidewalk with 2 battered suitcases and the echo of her warning hanging in the humid August air. I didn't care about footsteps. I cared about space. After the funeral home released Mom's ashes, cremated the same day she died of the aneurysm that stole her mid-sentence while she was arguing with the insurance company about Dad's old medical bills, I'd slept on my aunt's lumpy couch for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of hushed voices and pitying glances, of feeling like a ghost haunting someone else's life. This creaking, peeling Victorian duplex with its $350 a month top-floor apartment was my escape, my silence, my grief. The stairs were steep, groaning under my weight like old bones protesting. The top-floor hallway was narrow, dim, smelling of dust and lemon-scented wax. Mrs. Gable hadn't lied about the previous tenant. The apartment was furnished: a worn corduroy armchair, a thrift store dresser, a small kitchenette with mismatched dishes still in the cupboard, even clothes hung in the closet, floral dresses, sensible sweaters, a pair of scuffed loafers. The air was thick, still, and carried a faint, sweet scent of lavender and something else, something damp, like earth after rain. I opened windows, letting in the drone of cicadas and the distant hum of the highway. For the first time in weeks, I breathed. That first night, I fell asleep to the sound of my own heartbeat in the unfamiliar quiet. I woke at 1:47 a.m. to the sound of footsteps, not loud, not threatening, just there. Slow, deliberate steps crossing the ceiling above my bed. Thump, scuffle, thump, scuffle. The rhythm was familiar, comforting even. My sister Maya used to pace like that when she couldn't sleep, back and forth across her bedroom floor above mine, her slippers whispering against the rug. I'd lie in bed, listening, until her steps slowed, then stopped, until I heard her soft sigh as she finally sank onto her mattress. Mom would call up, "Maya, you all right, sweetie?" And Maya's muffled voice, thick with exhaustion, "Just thinking, Mama." I smiled into the darkness, tears pricking my eyes. It felt like a visitation, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone in this echoing house. I pulled a thin blanket tighter and drifted back to sleep, the phantom footsteps, a lullaby. The next night, they came again. Same time, same rhythm. Thump, scuffle, thump, scuffle. I lay still, listening, letting the sound wrap around my loneliness like a worn sweater. But this time, a detail snagged at me. Maya always wore thick wool socks over her slippers when she paced on cold nights. These footsteps were barefoot, soft, almost liquid. The third night, I couldn't sleep. The grief was a physical ache behind my ribs. I sat up, hugging my knees, listening to the familiar sounds of the old house settling, the groan of pipes, the sigh of floorboards. Then, just after 1:45 a.m., the footsteps began, closer this time, not just crossing the ceiling, stopping right above my bed. I held my breath, a soft tap, 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 followed like knuckles lightly rapping on wood. Maya used to do that too when she wanted my attention without waking Mom. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Maya?" I whispered into the darkness. The tapping stopped. Silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then a single soft sigh drifted down through the ceiling vent, a sigh that was unmistakably hers. I broke. Sobs racked my body, silent and desperate. "I miss you," I choked out. "I miss you so much." The sigh came again, closer now, seeming to fill the small room, and beneath it, a voice so faint it might have been the wind in the eaves. "I know." I spent the next day in a daze. Hope warred with disbelief. That night, I placed a glass of water and Maya's favorite strawberry lemonade on the nightstand, a childhood ritual when she'd had bad dreams. "For you?" I whispered before bed. When I woke, the glass was empty. The lemonade glass sat beside it, sticky with residue. My rational mind screamed coincidence, a draft, a mouse. But my heart knew Maya was here, with me. Then the footsteps changed. It started subtly. The rhythm grew uneven. Thump, thud, scuffle, thud. Heavier, less hesitant. One night, I woke to the sound of something being dragged across the floor above, a slow, grating scrape that ended with a muffled thump against the wall. The next night, the tapping returned, but harder, insistent. Rap, rap, rap. Right over my head, I called out, "Maya, what is it? What do you need?" Only silence answered. The lavender scent in the air turned cloying, thick with the damp earth smell I'd noticed on move-in day. And the room grew cold. Not just cool, biting cold that made my breath fog in the moonlight. I found the first message on the bathroom mirror the next morning, written in condensation, as if traced by fingertip. "Let me in." I scrubbed it away with trembling hands, telling myself it was just humidity. But that night, the footsteps were frantic. Thud, scrape, thud, scrape. They circled the room above, faster and faster, shaking dust from the ceiling. The cold intensified, frosting the window pane. The lavender smell vanished, replaced by the sharp metallic tang of wet soil, and the voice no longer a sigh, a whisper layered with the sound of roots tearing through damp earth. "Open the door, please, it's dark, so dark." Panic cut through my grief. This wasn't Maya. Maya wouldn't terrify me. Maya wouldn't make the temperature drop 20 degrees. I locked my bedroom door. I pushed the heavy armchair against it. I slept with the lights on. The footsteps stopped, but the cold remained, and the smell of earth clung to my sheets. Mrs. Gable found me the next afternoon sitting on the porch steps, shivering in the August heat. She took one look at my face and sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "You heard her," she said. Not a question. She led me to her tidy kitchen, poured 2 cups of tea, and told me about Eleanor Vance. "Owned this duplex for 40 years, Mrs. Gable murmured, staring into her cup. "Lived alone upstairs after her husband passed. Quiet woman. Kept to herself. Then 2 years ago, her sister moved in. Clara. Sickly thing. Cancer. Eleanor nursed her day and night. They were close. Like you and your sister, I'd wager." She paused, her knuckles white on the mug. "Clara died upstairs, in that very apartment. Peacefully, they said, in her sleep. But Eleanor, she couldn't let go. Started hearing things. Footsteps. Whispers. Said Clara was cold. Said she wanted to come home." Mrs. Gable's eyes met mine, sharp and sad. "Eleanor boarded up the attic door, nailed it shut, put salt lines on the floors, said the footsteps weren't Clara's, said something had followed Clara back from wherever she went, something that wore her voice, that hungered for the warmth of the living. I remembered the empty lemonade glass, the condensation on the mirror. Let me in." "Eleanor tried to leave," Mrs. Gable continued, her voice dropping. "Packed her bags one night. But when I checked on her the next morning, she was sitting in that armchair of yours, cold as ice, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The police said heart failure, stress. But I knew." She reached across the table, her hand covering mine. Her skin was papery thin, ice cold. "The footsteps didn't stop after she died. They got louder, angrier. The last tenant, a young man, he lasted 3 weeks, broke his lease. Said the thing upstairs screamed his name in his dead mother's voice." She squeezed my hand. "Eleanor's sister, Clara. She wasn't just sick when she died. She was lonely. And loneliness, it's a door some things know how to open." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, a kitchen knife in my lap, every lamp blazing. 1:45 a.m. came and went. Silence. Then, just before 2 hot a.m., the footsteps began. Not upstairs. Thump, scuffle, thump, scuffle, coming down the stairs. My blood turned to ice. I was on the top floor. There was nowhere above me. The footsteps stopped outside my apartment door. The doorknob rattled gently. Click, click, click. I held my breath. The rattling stopped. Then a soft, familiar sigh seeped under the door. "Open up, little sparrow. It's just me." Maya's voice, exactly as I remembered it, warm, tired, loving. The voice that sang me to sleep when thunderstorms rattled our childhood windows. Tears streamed down my face. The knife trembled in my hand. "Maya," I whispered, "the lock's cold." The voice sighed. "My hands are cold. Let me warm them by you." I almost did it. I almost stood up, almost turned the deadbolt. The grief was a physical pull, a hook in my chest, dragging me toward the door. But Mrs. Gable's words echoed, something that wore her voice. I pressed my back against the door, the cold wood biting through my shirt. "You're not her," I choked out. "Maya wouldn't make this room freeze. Maya wouldn't smell like dirt." Silence. Then the voice changed. The warmth bled away, replaced by a dry, rasping vibration that seemed to come from the floorboards themselves. "She is cold. So cold. The dirt is cold. Let me in. I will warm her. I will warm you both." The doorknob rattled violently. The armchair scraped against the floor, dragged backward by an invisible force. Frost spread across the doorframe like black veins. The lavender scent vanished, swallowed by the reek of wet clay and decay. I ran, not to the front door. The lock was old, flimsy. I ran to the fire escape window, fumbling with the latch, my fingers numb with cold. The doorknob shattered. Splinters flew. The door swung inward, revealing only darkness and the smell of earth, thick, suffocating. Footsteps crossed the threshold, slow, deliberate. Thump, scuffle, thump, scuffle. Stopping inches from where I crouched by the window, I squeezed my eyes shut, the knife raised. "Maya," I sobbed. "I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. I'm sorry I let you feel alone." The cold lessened, just a fraction. The earthy smell receded, replaced by the faintest hint of lavender, and Maya's voice, clear and strong, filled the space, not from the darkness, but from the deepest part of my own memory. "You were always there, little sparrow. Always." I opened my eyes. The apartment was empty. Moonlight streamed through the window, painting the floor silver. The door hung open on broken hinges. The armchair sat neatly in the corner. The air was warm. Still. On the floor, where the footsteps had stopped, lay a single object. Maya's old hairbrush, the one with the chipped turquoise handle she'd carried since college. I'd buried it with her. I picked it up. It was warm. I didn't lock the door that night. I left it open. The footsteps never returned, but sometimes, on the quietest nights, when the grief feels like a stone in my chest, I sit by the window with Maya's brush in my hand. The air grows still. The scent of lavender drifts on a breeze that shouldn't be there, and if I listen very closely, beneath the hum of the city, I hear it. Not footsteps, a soft, contented sigh, the sound of a sister finally at peace, not in the attic, not in the dirt, but right here, in the space between heartbeats, in the warmth I carry. Mrs. Gable replaced the broken door. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a small potted lavender plant one morning. "For the windowsill," she said. "Keeps the bad dreams away." She was wrong. The dreams still come. But now, in the deepest dark, when the loneliness threatens to swallow me whole, I place my palm flat on the warm wood of the floorboards And I wait, not for footsteps, for the sigh. I'm not alone, and neither is she. The house knows it now. It holds its breath. And in that silence, we remember. Some doors aren't meant to be locked. Some voices aren't meant to be silenced. Some love is too strong for even the deepest dark to keep buried. The footsteps were never hers, but the sigh, that's all her. And it's enough